This is a Smash Zoom Entertainment production. The following material has been adapted from a screenplay that has been optioned more than once, but tragically and astonishingly not yet produced. The authors feel that this story, trapped until now in its screenplay form, should not languish unread on a hard drive or in the cloud or in the email inbox of the latest agent or producer who said they'd like to read it, but just isn't. So here is the ebook/audiobook version of Hollywood Nights. Story by Derek Stucker, David Smith, and Kent Conrad. Screenplay by David Smith and Kent Conrad, and this ebook audiobook rendition is read by David Smith. Chapter 1. Right. This is beloved British comedian and movie personality Ricky Winsleydale, and you may not believe this, but I am dead. And no, I did not record this earlier to be played after my demise. It's not like that wildly haunting lung cancer commercial that Yul Brynner made before he popped his clogs. I was recently asked to do this, post-demise. Not sure quite how this works, being dead and narrating things. It's got something to do with quantum mechanics, temporal shifts, and the Apple Watch. Just kidding about that last bit. Apple Watches are completely useless. I consulted with Joe Gillis from Sunset Boulevard on some of the finer points of post-mortem voiceover work, so hopefully I picked up a few things there. You'd think in the afterlife you can finally rest, you know? But just like on Earth, every wanker you bump into has a podcast. Hey, do my podcast, yeah? I mean, it's not as bad as Los Angeles, but it's a problem. And here, everyone has a death story, so there's lots to talk about. The death story I'm going to tell you happened, well, either last year or about 1,300 years ago, depending on which time period you want to use. Right, well then, I'll just let the story unfold and jump in as needed. Basically, all you need to know right now is that, as stated, I'm a comedian, a British comedian, and I was knighted by the Queen for, bringing laughter to the world and all that shit. And there's a few other chaps, actors and musicians, who are also knights, and we all had a bit of a wild adventure. So settle into something you like to sit or lie down on, or go on your walk, or do your dishes and that, while you listen to a little story called Hollywood Nights. I'm going to start things off at a place called Gloucester Castle, an old and gloomy place in England in the year 708 AD. There was this knighting ceremony, and Queen Guinevere, King Arthur's wife. Most people know about the Arthurian legends and stories, so I don't feel much need to go into that, but you young folks may want to ask ChatGPT about it. So Guinevere was doing the knighting, and she was knighting a young guy named Tristan. Some other knights were there to watch, and also Merlin was there. For you younger folks, again, Merlin is like Gandalf before there was Gandalf. So that's the scene. This once magnificent castle, now crumbling after years of neglect, seemed now barely able to stand. The brilliant moon lit the once verdant, now barren valley below. I had to look up verdant when I got home after the first recording session, so don't feel too bad. Anyway, a dim, almost sad light was burning in the upper tower, where Queen Guinevere, an elegant woman in her 60s, I picture Jane Seymour like 20 years ago playing old Gwynnie here. She stood in the middle of the room, while a dashing and very young knight knelt before her, dressed in ill-fitting armor. This was the 17-year-old Tristan. 6 older and very weary knights flanked him on both sides, their once regal silk tunics patched and threadbare. Guinevere alone seemed to rise above their surroundings. Merlin began to speak in his solemn Gandalfy voice. "Tristan, you may kneel before your queen." Tristan did as he was told, having realized the gravity of the situation, and Guinevere met his gaze, paused dramatically before she spoke. There was something about this particular young man and situation, and it showed on her face. Then she said, "A knight is sworn to valor. His heart knows only virtue. His might gives others courage." An odd sound made her pause. The room darkened, then brightened again. A few of the knights glanced upward to an opening in the ceiling. Guinevere continued, unmoved. "Protect thou all good ladies, and fight their quarrels, but may your sword protect first your queen." Merlin's eyes fixed on the damaged roof and the exposed patch of sky he spied through it. His hands tightened around his staff, which, again, looks way too much like Gandalf's staff, but seriously, Merlin had a staff way before Gandalf did. "In the name of God, I give you the power to meet justice." As she got out that last thing about meeting justice, the roof shattered with a thunderous explosion. Debris rained down on the group below. Merlin, his staff suddenly aglow, and in his hand, reached out to the queen. "My queen!" he called out. But at that same moment, a wall of ice separated them. The blast of ice shards gushed into the room from the now gaping hole in the roof and blew Tristan backward, and he landed at the feet of a now frozen red-bearded knight. Tristan scrambled to his feet, taking a step to render aid to the poor man, but before he could get there, an enormous black claw shattered the night into tiny shards. Tristan looked up, and up, into the eyes of a monster. Frost and foam and steam snorted from its massive nostrils, and icicles dangled from its mouth. Tristan shouted, "What is this demon?" Merlin answered above the din, "Not a demon, an ice dragon of ancient times. He's trapped the queen in a prison of ice." Merlin raised his staff, and was knocked to the floor as the dragon belched a thick sheet of ice toward him. The remaining men took to their arms, but swords and spears bounced harmlessly from the dragon's steely-scaled belly. Some of the weapons tangled in the thick, matted fur covering its back. "The beast's hide deflects our blades and turns away our arrows," Tristan said. Then another powerful blast of ice fused some of the men together. The dragon turned, seeking its prey. Tristan again shouted, "He has her! Merlin, cast a spell!" "There is no time," Merlin answered. The dragon scooped Guinevere up and flapped its great leathery wings and slithered through the hole in the roof, and all was suddenly quiet for a long moment. Merlin spoke first. "Our queen is lost." Well, that was just... if only this wasn't a cheap book and you could actually see what was happening. There was like the heads of knights rolling around encased in ice and just some amazing stuff. But in the end, the dragon just carried Guinevere off like she was a little doll or something. Tristan was obviously slightly put out and wanted to go and get the queen, so he ran off to the stables to get his horse, and Merlin had to calm him down, like he's really going to go ride behind a dragon in the middle of the night with like no flashlight or whatever. So Merlin followed him to the stables to try to talk some sense into the boy. Tristan slammed a saddle down on an unsuspecting horse. Then he held up the sword that he was almost knighted with, and, oh, this is beautiful, he brushed off the frost and lashed it to the saddle. Merlin appeared in the doorway. "Tristan," he said. "You can't stop me, Merlin. I'm a knight of the Round Table. I will ride out alone if need be." Tristan hopped onto the horse. Merlin, at his side in an instant, whispered into the horse's ear, and the horse promptly closed its eyes. Tristan tried to spur on the slumbering beast. "Hya! Hya! Merlin, what did you say to my steed?" Tristan kicked and kicked, but the horse nickered sleepily. "Did you not see what happened, Merlin? Men fused together into ice." "Of course I saw." "Wake up my horse, Merlin. I must protect my queen. I'm a knight of the Round Table." "The ceremony was not quite finished. You're not quite a knight." Merlin pulled the sword from the saddle while Tristan, defeated, slid off the horse to his feet. Merlin put a comforting hand on the youth's shoulder and said, "There are no more knights in England." So Tristan and Merlin are the only bastards in England who can help save the queen. But now let's move on over for a bit to the present day, about 1300 years later. Meet the nauseatingly handsome British actor Mason Grant. He's sort of a young Hugh Grant, with better teeth, maybe a bit of Tom Hardy without the beat-to-shit face. We'll join him in the middle of a press junket for his new movie. A very pretentious Piers Morgan-type man was interviewing him. He narrowed his eyes at Mason and said, "Mason Grant. It does seem to be your time, doesn't it? Sir Mason Grant, I should say." "You should indeed," Mason said playfully. The interviewer squirmed in his porcine fashion, trying to hide his disgust, and not doing so good of a job. Luckily for Mason Grant, he was too involved with himself to notice. The interviewer plowed on. "Recently knighted, 2 gigantic blockbusters in a row, and perhaps poised for another with your remake of one of the most beloved films in the history of cinema. Do you think the world needs your remake of Lawrence of Arabia?" "Well, keep in mind it's not my remake, it's the Duffer Brothers film. Of course, T.E. Lawrence is an iconic role. I understand the original's quite good." The interviewer blinked and shook his head and leaned closer to Mason and said, "You understand? You haven't seen the original film?" Mason began to squirm a bit. "I really wanted to approach the role as objectively as possible." The interviewer flipped roughly through his notepad, settled on some other question, cleared his throat. "Sir Mason, has knighthood changed you in any way?" "Oh, I'd quite recommend it. My table at La Caprice is now a corner booth, and I'm getting more tail than a toilet seat at Victoria Station. Kidding, of course. It is a great honor, and all that. Really something." The interviewer could not have been more disgusted. Well, let's be honest, the man was jealous, but he channeled it into disgust as he chided Mason. "One of the highest honors of the land, the Empire, and for you it means quicker cravats and shagging with less pesky conversation. What a clever boy. What a nice little extra shove down the shithole for what once was a great civilization." Now Mason was silent. He coughed nervously and said, We're done then? They were done. Mason gathered his things, and after getting the phone number of the fetching production assistant who helped organize the press junket, Mason made his way through the lobby of the lavish hotel. He got on the phone and spoke into it as he headed toward the exit. Dennis? Yeah. He had a bit of a meltdown. Blamed me for the empire falling apart. Get it up on TikTok ASAP. Well, someone once said the only bad publicity is your obituary. P.T. Barnum said that. Did you know that, or did you just Google it? Bullshit. My car's here. Mason climbed into the car and pocketed his phone, and he sat for a moment, lost in thought. His driver was Rodrigo, a Nigerian man in his 50s. Oh, here's a note about specifying people's skin color. You can kind of imagine whatever person you want, of any color, if you feel like it, while listening to this story. The authors, Dave and Kent and Derek, felt like making this guy a Nigerian, and you can picture whatever you think a Nigerian guy looks like. Now, if the race or gender is not specified, picture whatever you want. Have fun. If I say there is a ticket taker at a tube station, if you want to picture a lesbian aboriginal dwarf, go for it. Right, back to the Nigerian man. He knew Mason pretty well, and he decided to see what was eating him. Did you cock it up, sir? Yes, but with style. Mason paused and then said, Rodrigo, am I a complete tosser? My granddaughter adores you, so you can't be all bad. Well, Cindy loves everyone, that's why she's an angel. Oh, here. I got something for her. It's got unicorns on it. She should like it, 'cause unicorns. Rodrigo inspected it and said, Tiffany's. She'll love it, sir. Thank you. Take a nap, sir. I think I will. Mason relaxed and tried to get some sleep. He'd been on this junket for days, and had been sleeping like a toddler with a wet nappy, in and out of different time zones. Oh, the time zone thing is about to get really weird. Hang on for that. And Rodrigo drove on, while I transition you back to the medieval period we started with. But now I can introduce you to the lovely, enchanting, super hot Princess Lillian. Hotter than Meghan Markle or Kate Middleton. She is presently astride her trusty steed. Jealous, I know I am. And is nodding off for a nap herself, when the voice of Penelope, her petite handmaiden, picture that lesbian aboriginal dwarf here just for fun if you want to. She rides up beside the princess and speaks, not too loudly. Wake up, milady. Lillian was about to fall off the horse, but she woke and startled. Penelope helped steady her and put her right ways back in the saddle again. You fell asleep, princess, and you were having a frightful nightmare. You almost fell off your horse. She looks around and shudders. The forest, it's bewitched. I'm all right, Penelope, Lillian said. Do you think we'll be back in time for Tristan's ceremony? Lillian scoffed. The ceremony. Penelope, my grandmother, your queen, is a perfectly stupid woman. Penelope gasped, and Lillian continued. We're on the run. Our mere existence is a death sentence, and she's having ceremonies. Arthur's long dead. It's Morgana's day. Is that Merlin up ahead? The two women were shocked when they saw the state of Gloucester Castle. Merlin was there, and he made his way toward them. What happened? Lillian said. Guinevere. No, Lillian cried. Merlin calmed her. She lives, until Morgana decides otherwise. Lillian stared harshly at him. You had one job. As did you, young one. Oh, she didn't like that. Lillian turned away, but Merlin was a patient one, and he waited for her to speak again. There's no help to be found in the northern lands, not even for the hand of a young princess. And there are no more knights of the Round Table, Merlin said. How? Lillian asked. Surprise attack. Morgana has a new pet, a sea dragon from ancient times. It slaughtered our bravest and made off with our queen. Well, do something. I am old. My magic fades, while hers grows stronger. She has in her possession the Eye of Balor, and now seeks Excalibur. A stunned silence followed, largely because Lillian, a proud maiden of her clan, had no idea what the Eye of Balor was. Neither do you, dear listener, but believe you me, this is important. Just as important as Lillian not letting Merlin know what she doesn't know, even though he knows. Royals, don't question it. What she does know is the importance of the great sword Excalibur. Morgana knows the power to wield Excalibur descends only through Arthur's bloodline. She wants me. She'll trade for me. Princess. It will buy you time, Merlin. Time? For what?
Tristan has joined them. Sir Tristan, I presume? No, ma'am. He looked at Merlin. Not quite. We were interrupted before the ceremony was completed. Then Merlin is right. There are no more Knights of the Round Table. There was one of those full third trimester pregnant pauses, and then Lillian said, Perhaps Merlin can summon the great knights of the past to come to our rescue. Pardon me, Princess, but the knights of the future are our only hope, Tristan said.
Knights of the future, you say?
Merlin mused. Well, I bet you know where this is going, don't you? Merlin stroking his beard, looking thoughtfully out at the landscape, music swelling, and now you're going to find out why we started in Gloucester, BF England 1,000 years ago, instead of lovely modern London, which, by the way, is where we're going now.
Yes, modern England. A red carpet event. Crowds shouting, camera shutters clicking. A familiar announcer's voice shot through the loudspeakers. It's the Aston Martin 2025 Product Placement Awards, brought to you by Tito's Vodka. Drink responsibly. With special guests, Mason Grant, Florence Pugh, Sir Reginald Davies, Leonardo DiCaprio, Elvin James. This bleeping show. I'd hosted it the year before, but they didn't invite me back this year. Probably my overuse of the words catamite and pedos, in regards to both presenters and award winners, rubbed some folks the wrong way, I suspect. But it was still one of the biggest social events in London, and only the best of the best were on the red carpet. Like the guy who sang all those songs you love, I'm Not Backing Down, Little Dancer, Goodbye Ruby Slippers, Elvin James. Gay is the guy who had his mail forwarded to the glory hole, and he still had the hottest Indian girl in town on his arm. A reporter shouted to him as they walked past. Elvin, are you and Padme an item? Are you blind and dumb? No, she's a natural twink magnet. That was cheeky, but not nearly as cheeky as the next world-class British Brits so British they crap crumpets and piss the Union Jack. And no, I do not know what that means, but it's me and my man Reg. See, we were nominated, so even though I couldn't host, they couldn't keep me away. I'm the cute Hollywood plump one, and Reginald Davies, to those taking notes, looks 1.5 feet in the grave. We were great mates. This is an abomination, Reg said. Come on, Reg, I wrote our lines myself, I said. Reg loved me, even though he stared daggers at me, sighed and rolled his eyes every time I spoke, and never talked to me when not on set. That's just his way. Reg is right. This is the Baton Death March of award shows, Elvin said. Elvin, Reg said, there's a pub across the way. Let's go get pissed like respectable knights of the realm. Reg was maybe a bit of a curmudgeon. Maybe all of us were upset wankers. Maybe we were taking what we had for granted. But one of the knights there still had a bit of conscience, sense of accountability, wanted to suck up in case we were on camera. You heard him earlier. That was Mason Grant, who said, Would any of you care to give back the generous checks you received for tonight's little event? I don't see why I should have to work just because I've been paid, Reg said. Come on, guys, this is great, eh, Reg? I said. Where the hell is Sid? Asked Reg. I think he's in the loo, said Elvin. A toilet flushed and then Sid came through a door. Now imagine if a pile of garbage were a man, the whirling center of a landfill turned flesh, plastic and torn fabric and bulging nappies, all of it covered with raccoons. We don't have many raccoons in England, but somehow they've managed. That is Sid Richards. I mean every word is a compliment. He's at home on the red carpet, passed out in the bathroom, passed out on the red carpet, which he was wobbling towards, flask in hand, at this very moment. Hey, are you Sid Richards? Said some guy on the street. I'm off double frag, Sid sort of said. It's Sid Richards. Hey, chap, the show's starting like right now. You better get over on the red carpet with your mates. Yeah, bottle. Back on the red carpet, there were shutters clicking and people staring at their phones instead of watching the live event. Reg said, Who's the purple-haired tot with the microphone? That's Gray Drake. She's great, Mason said. Gray was talking to her cameraman. Here are my little knights. We all gathered around her. So cute. Ooh, Sid, get your hand off my ass, would you? Thank you. All right, 3, 2. It's not often that I'm this close to 5 actual knights. Gentlemen, did you all bring your swords? We all giggled. Then she went on. Elvin James, your new album, Sir Wanks-a-Lot, is enjoying a second week in the top 10. Congrats. Thanks, Gray. It was great to get back into the studio. And the newest member of the order from BBC to Hollywood to knighthood. Where does Mason Grant go next? Tonight I think your place, Gray, she continued. Ricky and Reg, Sirs Ricky and Reg, I mean, Is Woody's Got Wood ever coming to the big screen? Then I said, Oh, you had to ask, didn't you? Naughty girl. Put old Reg on the spot, eh, Reg? Come on, Reg. Everyone wants to hear it. Reg sighed but gave in and uttered a line he hated, but gave it his all. Sweet Fanny Adams, she put it in sideways. Let's pause and take it in. The majesty, the joy of a proper one-liner. Nearly 35 episodes of British television our show ran, and Reg delivered that with perfect conviction, with studied poise. I wrote it, didn't I? Yeah, I think I did. Could you imagine that all of Reg's training, years with the Royal Shakespeare Company, thousands of performances on stage, and it was my little one-liner that'll probably go on his gravestone? Makes a man proud. Gray was going on. Sid, Earth to Sid. Eyes off my chest. Are you looking forward to tonight's show? Shit, between me, you, Elvin, what's his dick, Winsor, whatever. There's more nights here than old Flupanogle round table. Interesting. Let's re-annex India, Mason said. And that's it? Can I get a shot with all the knights? Gray said. Here's another one of those, what you might call pivot points. There were the 5 of us, all in line, all looking fat except Sid and Mason, and sassy and like rich old boys having a rich old time. And then in the time it took for a digital camera to flash its red light, it happened. There was a little zap, and then Gray said, where'd my little naughty knights go? Hello? Is this a promo for something? I have a different rate for promos. Now imagine the most amazing vistas of cosmic semi-reality, shifting colors and landscapes of incredible depth and intensity. Imagine vortexes and spinning thingies and... Look, I'm sorry, I don't write sci-fi crap. I was into Star Trek, but have you seen the ratings lately? I don't even keep it on the resume. And however they picture things in those movies and TV shows, it wasn't that at all. It was a camera flash, and there was a sort of popping noise and a whoosh. And thus begins Chapter 2. Cheese! Where the hell did she go? Mason said. Where the hell did we go? Reginald said. Need a fag. Malls, yeah, Sid sort of said. Cigarettes began to light and cell phones began to angrily beep. I get no cell service out here, Mason said. Me too, said Reg. Roaming, I said. Tits up, Elvin said. Where the absolute hell are we? Mason said. Where we were was a glen, I think. In fantasy books, things always happen in glens and glades and meadows, I think, which is a nice word for a swamp. Imagine trees and grass and everything London wasn't anymore, including an absolutely hellish silence where a man could think. The entire point of the modern world is to keep people from thinking. So we were all a little unnerved. Elvin said, Why is it so quiet? Are we being punished? Just wait for the limo, man, Sid kind of said. At least Sid's not panicking, I said. Then Reginald said, That's because this happens to him all the time. Blackout, wake up in the woods someplace. You blacked out? Mason said. I had a sort of psychedelic thing, like the opening credits of the old Doctor Who. Now, I understand this contradicts what I said earlier about the cosmic vistas. The explanation might be that every man experiences the mysteries of the magical world in different ways, their own doors of perceptions opening individually. Me, I think Mason's just a drama queen, and a liar. That explains it, Mason continued. I must have gotten drunk after the show and shagged my brains out with Tatiana. Anya, I corrected. Anya, yes, and now I've passed out and you are all part of a post-coital alcohol-induced nightmare. But I had the psychedelic thing too. How come this is your nightmare? I said. Elvin shushed us all because he was hearing something that turned out to be music coming from someplace nearby. It reminded me of the party scene in Excalibur. You hear that? Elvin said. Flutes and mandolins, maybe? Over there, Reg said. While this terrible change of scenery was a complete surprise to us knights, Merlin hadn't made a secret of his task to his compatriots. They were waiting for us, playing music, really gay-sounding medieval music. Lillian and Tristan and Merlin stood with a band and some roast pheasant and very stiff, strained, patient expressions on their faces. Lillian said, Do you think our knights of the future have gotten lost? It was no easy task, my lady. Only but twice in a century are the heavens aligned to allow such a bridge through time. See anything, Tristan? Perhaps. Over there. We brave knights walked towards the music. We braved the intimidating slight incline of the hill, mastered the trees whose branches were almost in our way, and we manfully complained about our expensive shoes being ruined by the slightly damp grass. I was beginning to think something was not just wrong, but perhaps very wrong. Then I said, "What do you make of this, Reg? I haven't seen a Tesco or an Indian restaurant since we've been here." "It's Mason's dream, ask him," Elvin said. And as we, like knights of old, jogged up a bit and had a walkie, we saw a boy crest a hill. While we were mostly tanned by beds and creams, this boy looked like he'd actually let the sun touch his skin. We'd found our first savage. "Ah, there's someone. Young man," Reg said. It was Tristan, all right. He had spotted us and had come to greet us. "Knights of England, I am Tristan." "Whose assistant are you?" Reg interrupted. We might not have been quite what Tristan was expecting. He stepped closer and examined our outfits and did not know what to make of it all. Then he said, Well, you are knights, are you not?" Yes, we are knights," Reg said, a bit annoyed. Mason was thinking it was about time he steered the dream in another direction. So he said, "Come on, Reg, Ren fair. You've been doing this long enough, old boy. Let me get things rolling." Let me set the scene. Mason stood in front of us. Merlin and Lillian and Tristan were there, on top of the hill, looking down at us. Mason cleared his throat and addressed the new arrivals. "It's a pleasure to be here, and on behalf of King Charles, we heartily endorse this event and/or product." Someone actually clapped a few times, not sure who. Then someone else coughed. Then it was silence. Merlin chose that moment to respond to Mason. "I am Merlin. It is I who have brought you here." "And where is here exactly?" Reg asked. Lillian answered, "Where is England? When is a more prudent question for you, I expect. It is the year 710 A.D. See? Perfect explanation from the lovely lass. I'm getting some great ideas about where this dream's going." "Hello, love," Mason said. "This one doesn't even try to hide his wanton desires," Lillian said to Merlin. "And his hands are as delicate as a monk's. And the rest of them look even more pathetic." "Princess Lillian," Merlin tried to say. "They're not heroes. They're a liability, a mistake. Send them home. I'm going." Then she actually did ride off on her horse. We weren't much fussed, I guess, except for Mason. He kept his eyes on her. "Stop staring at the poor girl, Mason," I said. "Unless you can undress her with your eyes. Can you do that?" "Hey you, assistant person," Mason said. "Tristan." "That's great. Who is she?" "The princess?" "Princess Buzzkill. Why the hostility?" "Princess Lillian. She's on her way to surrender herself to Morgana." "That's bad, right? Morgana's bad?" Mason said. "I know of no greater evil," Tristan answered. "That sounds like a cue if I've ever heard one," Mason said. Then he grabbed Tristan's sword and climbed onto Tristan's horse. "That's my sword and my horse." "Mason, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Reg said. "I'm going to rescue the princess and gain access to her portals of ecstasy and all that. I'm just going with it." "What a friggin' man. I mean, I've never worked with Mason formally. Had some parties, was there pretty readily to pick up the birds he'd turned down. But I'd always thought he was kind of a pretty boy. But a pretty boy who did his own stunts. And he rode that horse like a champ. Wielded the sword pretty well, too. Not that I actually knew anything about that. But he looked good. That's important. But did he really think he was dreaming? That was hard to tell." Lillian had gone into a dark patch of forest, and Mason followed. He stopped after about 10 seconds. Because he'd lost her. "Princess? Queen? Whatever the hell you are, where'd you go?" Whatever he thought, it didn't stop him from riding further into the dark forest, a place of deep spookiness. God, he's so confident. If I'd had half his confidence, I'd have paid way less for Then he finally spied her at the end of a clearing. "Princess? Girl? Love interest? What do I call you?" "Call me nothing. I've nothing to do with you. Go away." Right near where she'd brought her horse, there was a little grove of trees, and all of a sudden it grew. It gnarled like a big hand of wood, making a creaking, shadowy canopy right above her. Mason saw it happen and said, "What the hell? I'm not a fan of this dream." He rode forward, even as Lillian shied from him. Then she stopped, staring, shaking like a little leaf. Mason caught up and was probably going to say something glib and panty-dropping when he saw what she was staring at. Is that a statue?" Mason said. "It's a knight's armor, with a man still inside, rotting." She began to cry a little. The armor was held up by twisted wood, and there was a sign hanging from the dead man's neck, which Mason read aloud. "Reward for the capture or death of outlaw knights, by order of Queen Morgana the Fair." Thwap!
One of my favorite sounds, by the way. Just as the dark green knight was going to strike, the previously referred to leathery sack attached to an arrow exploded against the attacking sword. Something like a cloud formed on the blade and hilt. Then it moved further up the attacker's arm. The knight stopped with only mild irritation, but then his expression changed as he realized that it was a swarm of termites that was now attaching itself to him. Like frat boys coming out of a club looking for a late-night snack. They began to burrow into his wooden skin. Tristan, on horseback, knocked another arrow. Yeah, did you know that word, knock? Because I didn't know that one until I started reading the screenplay, that knock means to load up an arrow into your bow. But it's knocking without the K in the front. Great word. Impress your friends. Yeah, so Tristan did that, and then the dark green knight shrieked, grabbed his own arm at the socket, and pulled, and with a sound like a falling tree, tore his own damned arm right off. Then he threw it to the ground, in a little moment of half-triumph, for he had avoided being eaten by termites. But he's down one arm, which will take a while to grow back. Like a couple weeks, and it will be a little stub for a while at first. Anyway, the whistling sound came again, and the knight did a skillful Matrix-style maneuver, causing the arrow to miss him. And then the other knight realized what was going on and said, "Merlin's magic!" And then he hunkered down on his horse and drove his thorny wooden boot heels into the sides of his poor horse, and the thing bolted off, really fast, followed quickly by his one-armed compatriot. Tristan arrived just then and jumped off his horse, landing right next to Lillian. He reached out a hand to her, but she slapped it away, her other hand covering her busted nose. Tristan and Lillian both turned their stares to Mason, and seemed something approaching furious. Mason didn't seem to be concerned. Then he said, "Hadn't ridden for 3 years. Pretty good, considering, Lillian and Tristan walked away, leaving him there alone. He kept talking. I mean, really, how am I supposed to beat a man who tears off his own arm, right? Where's everyone off to then? So, now we get to have a visit with the evil Queen Morgana herself. We're at a moss-covered castle with a giant tree growing up right out of the middle of it. Really, this tree is enormous. They just don't grow that big anymore, I can tell you. This is where Morgana has Guinevere down in some dank dungeony place. Another green knight, Morgana had quite a few interchangeable knights like this, escorted Guinevere through the dark and damp and stony passageways of Corbenic Castle, home of Morgana. Guinevere followed the stomping brute, trying to avoid dampening her daintily sandaled feet in whatever the muck on the floor was. Very thick roots serpentined the walls and lined the floors. Really, if any lawyers walked through this area, they would require the owner to put up some signs to avoid trip-and-fall lawsuits. But this being the Middle Ages, that sort of thing was not big on people's minds. The roots gradually gave way to more green foliage as they climbed from the depths of the structure. Guinevere shielded her eyes as they rounded a final corner. Bright sunlight was spilling in from the open roof over an atrium in the center of the castle. The room was filled with lush flora and vines spilling down all around, framing the throne where sat Morgana herself. Next to Morgana, his back to the entrance, was the dark green knight from before, his torn-out arm half grown back with a little twig, for which the other wooden knights were having a great time making off-color jokes. Morgana, slender and beautiful, appeared to be about 30 years of age, but was much, much older. She stood to greet Guinevere with mock respect. She wore a tight-fitting méchie ensemble, accentuating her curves, and an odd necklace which appeared to be made from snake scales. Morgana opened her arms to indicate their surroundings, and said, "I opened the place up a little. Does the Queen approve?" "It smells of damp and rot," was the answer from Guinevere. Morgana chuckled and then said, "Once your husband decided the Grail would not be found here, he left it to the wind and rain. I made it live again." Guinevere scoffed and then said, "When Camelot is restored, I'll see that you are buried here." Morgana slithered her slender and supple frame down to the chair to join Guinevere and said softly to her, "Camelot? I have gotten as close as I can to the old place. That accursed fog never seems to lift." Guinevere's response had a tinge of disgust. "Only true kings may approach, not usurpers, and not without—" She stopped abruptly, looking away to avoid Morgana's probing gaze. Morgana smiled and continued, "Excalibur. May I call you Gwen?" "You may not." Morgana picked a honeysuckle from a hanging vine and sniffed it, and then said, "Merlin told me that Excalibur was buried with Arthur. He was lying." Then Guinevere said, "If only I knew where it was, it would be darkened with your blood." Morgana laughed and twirled the honeysuckle between her fingers. "Poor Gwen. For you, it's only a piece of metal. Only those with the blood of Arthur in their veins can unlock its true power." "Excalibur rests once again with the Lady of the Lake," Guinevere said. "She never comes when cold," Morgana said. "Let's try," Guinevere said. "Dunk your head in the water. I'll help." The years have not dulled the sharpness of your tongue, nor have those years wrinkled your face. How much of your magic is employed to keep you so youthful and slender, Morgana? And at what cost? We can discuss beauty tips another time. Oh, this is cool. Morgana has been twirling this little honeysuckle in her fingers, and when she touches it to Guinevere's lips, it comes to life and curls around her jaw, clamping her mouth shut. Lots of people would like to see me wearing one of those, I expect. Then Morgana said, "Did you know that Merlin has been playing in the waters of time? He has sent for knights from the future, and has brought them hence. They may do my job for me." Morgana laughed sexily, although everything she did was sexily done. But it was all lost on Guinevere, 'cause she's straight. Only had eyes for Arthur. He was a true alpha, and a looker, I can tell you. Anyway, Morgana stalked in that sexy way up the steps to her wooden throne. At about this time, our pathetic little heroes were sitting in a mule-drawn wooden cage. The wooden wheels on the rough dirt road was a far cry from the luxury sedans these chaps were used to riding around in. Some straw under their butts was the only shock absorber. All around them, peasants, villagers, even people in tattered nobleware were walking with packs on their backs. A whole community was on the move. Elvin began describing the situation. "These poor villagers, everything they own strapped to their backs. They look hungry. Do you think they'll eat us?" I asked. Then Reg joined in and said, "They're still British, Rick. Drawn and quartered, perhaps, not eaten." "Well, we're being sent home, which is where we should be," Elvin said. Mason had been sitting silently in this corner of the cage, brooding. Not much more one could do than brood, really, in a place that seemed designed for brooding. Actually, he was sort of combining brooding and sulking. Then Mason spotted a young boy walking by. This was Edward, and he was about 9 years old. He was dragging a sack that was way too big and heavy for him, and it struck Mason that this boy was just the spitting image of the boy he saw earlier at the hotel. But when he looked up at Mason, there was no excitement or reverence in the kid's eyes. More like disgust and disappointment. Then Mason said, "Elvin, did you see that boy walk by?" "The filthy one?" "Yeah, did you notice anything strange about him? Other than the mud-like stuff on his face and neck and farm animal dung stuck to his ankles, I noticed that he didn't run up and ask you for an autograph. Actually, he looked like he might spit on you," Elvin said. "I noticed that too. I'm quite perceptive, you know. That's one of your best features." "Really?" "Yes, matched only by your gullibility." "Right. Well, I didn't like that look, Elvin. It's almost causing me to feel something I was taught never to feel." "You mean the feeling that while the sun is the center of the solar system, it is in fact Mason Grant that is the center of the universe?" "Have you been talking to my therapist?" Mason said. "We have the same therapist," Elvin said. "She's great. Anyway, no, the word I was thinking was..." There was a bit of a pause there. "Yes?" Elvin said. "Shame. There, I said it. There was absolutely nothing pleasant about the way that shite-smeared kid looked at me. I felt shame." "Don't you dare say what I think you're about to say," Elvin said. Then Mason said what Elvin thought he was about to say. "Bollocks, we're not going home." "Mason," Elvin said, "we were here 6 minutes and you nearly decapitated a member of the royal family." "I still thought I was dreaming. She's lucky I didn't start fondling her jubblies." "Mason, for everyone's sake, we have to go back to where we belong," Elvin said, and Reg grumbled in agreement. "Why?" Mason said. "We all have, schedules and appointments and things," Elvin said. Aren't you sick of pretending?" Mason said. "Mason," Reg said, "if you don't shut up, I'm going to start punching you in the face, and I'm not going to stop until we're in the 21st century." And Reg seemed to mean it. There was a rare moment of silence as all the knights contemplated the full implications of Mason's statement. Then Reg flew at him, hands balled into fists, and Mason was only saved from a thespian pummeling by both Elvin and me holding the old man by the arms. "Mace, we'll get killed," Elvin said. Then Mason answered, seeming to ride the wave of some sort of Henry V St. Crispin's Day speech confidence in himself. "Fine. Let's go back to our lives of unearned luxury, our backsides pampered and kissed by every stranger we meet, never lifting a finger if it doesn't involve a fat paycheck." "That's our boy," I said, in mock relief. 'Cause I realized he was actually joking, and sadly I was realizing he was kind of right, and making a good point and all that. I leaned back against the splintery wooden bars as the cart plowed on through the mud and rocks and dirt. At least the sunset was nice. The cage rolled to a jerky and uncomfortable stop. They really made us pay, right up to the last inch. And we found ourselves parked very near to the tent that looked like an upscale model. A bit bigger, made of better material, and it had like an awning out front and a chair facing outward. The refugees had put Merlin's tent up first, and they were now working on their own lodgings. Merlin walked out of the tent and stood looking at us, leaning on his staff. Then the cage doors just opened on their own. Then Merlin started giving orders. "Out, everyone. Let us get this over with and get you back to your world. They apparently deserve you." So basically, that same night, we all gathered inside Merlin's dark and extremely musky tent, which somehow seemed bigger on the inside than it was on the outside. Anyway, I decided to take a few pictures because no one was ever going to believe all this had happened. I mean, with AI-generated pictures and Photoshop and all that, no one's going to believe it. But what the hell. Later, they gave us some foul-tasting stuff that they seemed to think was food, and we sat mostly silently until it became evening and we were called into Merlin's tent for the thing he was going to do to send us back to the future. The tent was dark, mysterious, and did not smell as bad as one might imagine. A single torch in the corner filling the tent with equal amounts of light and smoke. Merlin took his place behind a large rickety basin with wooden feet. The basin had wooden feet, not Merlin. The basin was shallow, but the water looked very dark and very deep. There was then a sudden flash of light, and Merlin looked up. That was my bad. I couldn't resist snapping a photo of my grinning mug. I held the phone up and showed the picture, and then I said to them, "To remember you by, Merlin. It's called a selfie. Come on, lads. Group shot with the wizard?" "It will be weeks before the next bridge is open. You must go now while the spell is still prepared," Merlin urged. "We're not going." It was goddamn Mason. Elvin sighed when he heard the words, and Reginald scoffed. Then I said, what?" "We are staying here, meaning we are not going anywhere." "I understand the concept," I said. "But Mace, this place is really scary, and really boring." Then Mason continued, for once with what looked to all of us like complete conviction. It was startling. "We're knights. We took an oath. We were called here to do a job. Let's do that job." Mason looked from face to face, hoping to see something take shape there. Reginald piped up. "Fine, Mason. Stay. Tom Holland is going to get all of your roles. Merlin, how does this work?" "Wait," Mason pleaded. "Don't you see? You have to. Because it's—" "See, without writers we're worse than useless," Elvin said correctly. Mason spied Merlin's sword right next to the torch, grabbed it, and held it aloft, to puzzled looks from everyone. "Put down the sword, Mason," Reg said. Then Mason said defiantly, "Some things are easier done than said." And with a hard swing, Mason took out the legs of the basin. It toppled over, spilling the waters of time into the ground, where they disappeared. I scrambled to pick up the basin, but it was no use. Then I said to Mason, "Mason, the spell, the waters of time thingy, you've ruined it." "It's no use now. You will all have to wait," Merlin said. We all grumbled in Mason's direction and headed off to our accommodations. The sounds of mourning were all around our tent. Not mourning with an OU, which would have been justified, just, the sunrise mourning. Most of us had not heard those sorts of wind and bird sounds in a long time, and, well, it was rather nice. The tent flap opened, sending blinding sun over the faces of your heroes sleeping in our coarse blankets on top of the dirt. Reg groaned and turned over. I yawned and sat up. Tristan stood silhouetted in the doorway for a long beat and stared at us. Then he entered, his face grim. He carried a bucket in one hand, with a long ladle in it, and a stack of roughly hewn wooden bowls in the other. He set the bucket down and looked into it. "The sun is up, so must we. I trust you are hungry. The dogs have all had their fill. Now it's your turn." I leaned in to take a look. "Looks like mostly meat. I was thinking of trying carnivore, so this works out." "Shut up and eat your breakfast, Rick," said Elvin. The food looked like watery terror porridge with chunks of things in it. "Looks like some sort of weaponized pot pie," I said. "I must speak with Merlin," Tristan said. Tristan turned to leave and ran smack into Mason, who was standing at the tent entrance. Tristan looked at him, face still grim. "Sorry, mate," Mason said. "You're not to leave this tent," said Tristan. "What, for our safety?" "For ours," Tristan said. I took a spoonful of the meat porridge and tried to talk around it and said, "Zing! I like these people. Sensible." Tristan pushed past Mason and said, "I will take my leave." "We can help, Tristan." "I doubt that." "Mason, come off it," Elvin said. "You brought us here. I demand a chance to fight." "Demand? A fight?" Tristan said. "Steady, chaps," Elvin said. 5 minutes, in the field. Bring a sword, Tristan said. Tristan walked around Mason and stormed out of the tent. Mason looked at his fellow knights for support. Then I said, "Never pegged you as the suicidal type, Mace. Even if you live, you'll never get the deposit back on that tux." Exactly 5 minutes later, our heroes were on the field. At the other end were the training soldiers, who were almost all just boys, some as young as 12. Tristan was demonstrating to one of them how to string a bow when he saw us so-called knights arrive. He said something out of earshot to the boys, which drew laughter. From the camp, Merlin, Lillian, and Penelope were approaching, with a few other villagers. Lillian was wearing a hooded cloak which obscured her bandaged nose. We were all out on the field to watch Mason get disemboweled, or at least to maybe lose an arm or a head. Elvin and I were having a conversation just then. "I had a dream about you last night, Rick." "Keep me out of your filthy dreams," I said. "Hey, you were the one doing all the filthy stuff," Elvin said. "Shh, Merlin's coming," I said. "Tristan, what is this about?" Merlin asked. "The stupid one wants to prove something. I'm going to help him." Which one is the stupid one?" "The stupidest one, I mean." "Ah, yes, Sir Mason." Mason stepped to the center of the field and said with his bravest authoritative voice, "Sword." Tristan was already there, holding the sword out to Mason, hilt out. Mason regarded it. Tristan said, "Here you are, Sir Mason Grant. Pointy end goes in the other fellow." Mason made a gesture and the rest of the crowd scooted back. The boys jeered as Tristan and Mason moved away from each other. "Let's have some room, everyone, please," Mason said. Then I said loudly, "Dibs on Mason's life back home if he dies. Or even if he's left crippled and can't walk, or can't even do voice work." Mason said, "Gentlemen, stop with the praise. We don't want me going into this thing with a big head." "Big heads are easy to hit. Watch that now," I said. "You all love to hear yourselves talk. How about action?" Tristan said. "I'm ready," Mason said. Tristan looked puzzled as he watched Mason and asked, "Why are you holding your sword in that odd manner? Have you ever held one?" 2016, White Samurai, 95 million opening weekend. Studied for 3 months under Master Matsuyushi. "And his daughter studied under you, if I'm not mistaken," Reginald said. Then the following happened. So Tristan, who's obviously more skilled and has actually been in a real sword fight, so he said one time, he comes at Mason in what probably was one of the few classic sword poses that Master Mitsubishi or whatever drilled him on, and he stood still till right when Tristan got close enough to strike, and then he did some really cool, really fast maneuver, and basically got Tristan on his knees with his blade at the boy's neck. You'd think he would have been pissed, but instead Tristan burst out nearly in tears. "I knew it! You are real knights!" "We are," said Mason. "Totally. Let me help you up." "Oh, more hugging. Okay, break." "But I don't understand why you hit the princess in the face the other day." Mason looked over at the princess, who was shaking her head in obvious disgust, and she said to Penelope, "I have reading to do in my tent. Come." Then she stormed off, followed by her lady-in-waiting, or whatever her job description was. "Tristan," Mason said, "you were the worst wingman of all time. Cretaceous, Jurassic, medieval, all of those." Lillian burst into her tent, seething. Her tent looked much homier than Merlin's, a lavender feel. Penelope came right in after her, matching her mistress's irritation. "Who does that fool think he is?" she said to Lillian. Merlin came in next, at a leisurely pace. "Princess, I know it seems—" "These men are buffoons, Merlin. Despite the theatrical swordplay, this Mason seems to have picked up someplace." "I might remind you that his inadvertent heroics did expose a trap. That's not a thing to ignore." "We need Excalibur, Merlin. Do you really think these bearded toddlers can find it?" "Children are full of surprises," Merlin said. "I need fresh air." Me and the boys walked through the village, among the local gentry. Some of us were quite recognizable in our own time, and it was actually hard to walk around because people would stop you and want to talk to you and stuff, which is nice, but also a drag sometimes. So walking through this place was different, in that no one came up to us, unless it might be to spit on us or scowl or shake their heads. We were near Lillian's tent when she popped out. Mason saw her first and broke off from the group and approached her, sort of confidently but somehow apologetically, and I made note to try to copy that because it was quite a thing. It was not going to work here, of course, but I might use it someday. Then he said, "How's the nose?"
Lillian seemed shocked that this dazzling idiot who smashed her face was talking to her.
"Who do you think you are?"
"A hero, my princess. A man of action." Mason moved to her, getting a little too close, and he took her by the hand. She slapped it away.
"Take your hands off me. You forget yourself."
Then Mason put on a sexy voice and said,
"I saw the way you looked at me when I bested Tristan. This may be our only chance. We may be dead soon."
"Really?" Lillian understood now, and her hands went right for the front of Mason's pants, and she grabbed him and squeezed really hard. Keep in mind, folks, that the women of the medieval era have a greater grip strength than us moderns, male or female. Even the royals here had to work with their hands and such, and Mason was feeling the difference right at that moment.
"Wow!"
Mason squeaked.
"You've proved yourself a real knight, Sir Mason. A useless, selfish wastrel who thinks only about glory and his sword."
"I'm sorry."
"I too am sorry. That I've seen my kingdom waste away while worthless shits like you drank themselves stupid, whored, and slaughtered one another, leaving to die the very people they swore to protect."
Then Lillian released him, and Mason took a knee.
"So there will be no fun and games for you, knight."
Lillian smirked with tears in her eyes, and then walked away. I walked over to Mason, who was too stunned and pained to move, his hands trying in vain to comfort his possibly permanently damaged junk. "Having trouble with Princess Cockblock, Mace? You're off your game."
"The problem is we're all a bunch of tossers," Mason said.
"And you're the head tosser in charge," I said. "You wanted to play knight."
"She's not all that hot,"
with that nose spread across her face. Now it was Mason who stormed away. What, I was totally right? Mason hobbled along the perimeter of the camp. He stopped at a pretty young woman who was throwing a pot of ashes out of a tent.
"Miss, do you have any ice?"
She looked around in a puzzled fashion.
"It's June, sir."
Then Mason realized, oh, bloody hell. She went back into her disgusting tent. "Damp cloth, perhaps?" There was no answer, and Mason sighed. After a few more painful steps, he was deeper into the darkening forest. He pulled out his iPhone for illumination. A high-pitched twang made him look up, and then duck, just in time to avoid an arrow to the face.
"Oh, forgive me, Sir Knight. I did not see you there," said a young boy.
He was a rather handsome 12-year-old. Appeared from between two trees. Tristan then appeared behind him.
"At least that one hit something," Tristan said.
Tristan and Mason locked eyes. Tristan gave a quick nod. Mason stood, brushed himself off. Tristan indicated the arrow, and Mason pulled it out of the tree and carried it over. The boy took it and ran off. "Tristan, what's Lillian's deal?" Tristan looked at Mason quizzically and said, "Deal?" "Yeah, like, how would a knight like me breach her defenses?" Tristan pondered it, then realized what Mason meant, and walked away very vexed and shaking his head. Mason had nowhere else to be, so he simply followed him. They made it to a clearing where more than a dozen other young boys, none older than 15, were knocking arrows into bows, attacking each other with sticks, learning the ways of combat that their station in life would bring them, whether they wanted it or not.
"Isn't it dangerous, practicing in the dark?" "Morgana's army will come without warning," was Tristan's answer.
Elvin came out of the forest and moved toward them. "Mason, I heard your fellas got knocked around a bit." "They're doing all right, thanks." Tristan started to shout at that moment. "Knights, down!" And they did get down, as a flurry of wobbly shot arrows flew right overhead.
"Jesus Christ!"
Elvin said. Then he stood up and looked at the archers.
"They're just kids," he said.
"They are who we have," Tristan said. Tristan walked back to his soldiers. Mason and Elvin watched him in silence.
"Mason, we're only
going to make things worse?
How much worse do you think things could get?"
Mason stared dramatically at Elvin, then hobbled away with one hand on his balls. At the campfire that night, I was gnawing on some meat from a leg bone, chatting with Tristan. "Pheasant, huh? Tastes funny without the steroids." Tristan tilted his head at me, then I tossed the bone away, though there was still meat on it. Tristan went to pick it up. Elvin smacked me on the head. "Sorry, mate," he said to Tristan. "Food is rather abundant where we come from."
"It took me hours to catch this," Tristan said.
"Sorry," I said.
Then Elvin said,
"Tristan, those knights who came for the princess, who were they?"
"Servants of Morgana, a powerful sorceress. She is the sister of Arthur."
"King Arthur?" I said.
"Yes. After he died, the kingdom was in disarray. Many knights broke away from the Round Table. Then Morgana's magic began to take hold upon the land. They looked like they were made of wood, I said. She has power over plants and trees and things that crawl. If the Knights of the Round Table had stayed together, they could have defeated her. We don't have them, we don't have Excalibur. You're our only hope. I must go and check the perimeter. He left Elvin and I staring at each other. Then I said to Elvin, King Arthur, Camelot, Merlin, I still can't get over the fact that all this stuff turns out not to be bollocks. It would have stayed bollocks if Mason hadn't... Did you hear that? What? We stayed quiet and could hear a very faint cry of a woman. Come on, Elvin said urgently. We went toward the direction the sounds were coming from, and we started seeing a crowd gathering at one of the tents. When we got there, Elvin pushed through them and found a woman crying over her young daughter. Elvin stepped in closer and I stood close by. We noticed that Lillian was also there, and she looked at Elvin with no expression at all and said, She's dead. Let me see her, Elvin said. He knelt down next to the girl and felt her neck. Then he looked at her leg and saw a ghastly infected gash covered with ratty bandages. Then Elvin quickly began doing CPR on her, which drew shrieks from the mother. Lillian even looked shocked as Elvin put his lips over the girl's mouth. Lillian moved toward him, and I could tell she was going to interfere, so I motioned for her to stop. She stopped and watched. The crowd closed in as Elvin worked. He pressed her chest, performed mouth to mouth. Nothing. Until the girl sputtered after a movie-like dramatic pause. Have you ever seen anyone just come back to life after getting CPR? No, it's always, oh no, it didn't work, and then crying, and then cough, cough, oh my God, it worked. So that's what happened. Lillian's face was an unreadable mix of horror and shock and praise. Others gasped as the girl came to life. Some shrank back in fear. Was this another wizard who defies death? But not Lillian. She turned to me and said, It would seem that not all of you are worthless. I smiled awkwardly at her. Elvin saw the fear in the mother, who was now afraid to approach her previously dead daughter. Elvin spoke to her calmly. She wasn't quite dead, though another few minutes and she would have been. What happened to her leg? She fell out of a tree. A branch tore open her leg. That was days ago. Elvin examined the wound, rubbed his chin in thought. Then he said, Do you have any fruit? Rotten fruit, I mean. I need some, now, for her. The mother was perplexed, but went away. Elvin looked at Lillian and handed her a dirty blanket from the floor. Tear this into strips and then boil the strips for a few minutes. When they're dry, bring them to me. Lillian happily grabbed them and ran off. I leaned in close and whispered, Rotten fruit? Penicillin. The wound is terribly infected. Fever nearly killed her. I knew that Elvin had actually qualified as a doctor before he hit it big. He was like an even gayer Graham Chapman. But I had completely forgotten about all that. I continued, Are you sure about this, Elvin? Aren't we messing with history? Giving them penicillin would be like violating the Prime Directive or something, yeah? His head tilted in wonderment. Rick, you grow stupider by the syllable. How do you do it? Anyway, go and get some firewood. Be useful. He placed a hand on the girl's forehead while I went to get firewood. Although I had no bleeding idea where I was going to get it, so basically I just started bothering people and begging for firewood. In another part of the forest, some teenage boys and girls were taking sips from a wooden jug full of some probably awful-tasting alcoholic brew. There were 3 boys and 2 girls. 2 of the boys began a sword fight with sticks. Reg stepped out from where he was in the trees and watched them. The boy sitting on the ground hid the jug. Reg gestured for the boy to give it to him, and he sheepishly handed it to Reg, who smiled and took a drink. Good God, what is this? The teens laughed at him. The sword fight ended with one boy on the ground and the other's stick at his throat. One of the girls said, Your man has lost, Juliet. Reg's eyes perked up after he heard that, and he looked at the delicate young lady and spoke to her. Juliet, is it? Yes. Reg smiled. He stepped toward her, going into character. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief that thou her maid art far more fair than she. The kids all turned to look at him now. Reg sat in front of her, growing more serious. While Reg was hitting on an underage girl, I was out carrying an armful of firewood that I had collected from various sources. I happened upon Reg, and I could hear what some might call good acting emanating from his gob, a thing he was rarely accused of. I stopped where I could still hear, but not be noticed. Reg went on. Two of the fairest stars in all the heaven, having some business, do entreat her eyes to twinkle in their sphere till they return. He kissed her hand, and this Juliet was now all aglow. The boy who had lost the fight made a fart sound. Juliet threw some dirt at him, then looked back at Reg and said, "More!" I've forgotten the rest. It's from a play, a very famous one, by the greatest playwright the world ever knew. He lived hundreds of years after you and hundreds before me. Reg looked at the two boys with the sticks, and I trudged on, so I could rid myself of this faggot. "What? It's in the proper context." "Oh, piss off. Look it up." Reg continued. "You know, there are some great sword fights in that play." He got up and gathered the boys together. The next morning brought a lovely sunrise. I had not seen one of those after waking up in decades. I had seen far too many before going to bed after a night of partying. This was much better. Work was starting around the camp. Sid walked past me, being dragged home by a busty wench, not the one from before, and he fell through the tent flaps with a satisfied grin. He stumbled and fell right at Mason's feet. Mason was sitting there, looking like he'd been awake all night. Elvin and Reg arose at this disturbance. "Can someone please invent coffee?" I said, then noticed Mason sitting there, and I said, "Aw, you need a touch-up, mate. Did you sleep at all last night?" "I don't know. Listen, I shouldn't have forced all of you into this." "Mason," Elvin began, but was interrupted. "I have to say this," Mason said. "No, you don't," Reg said. "I directed a play last night in the woods. Best I've felt in a decade. And no one here has heard of Sweet Fanny Adams." "Hey!" I shouted. Elvin added, "I think I saved a girl's life last night. I could do a lot more here." It was then that I saw it all. I knew what was about to happen. They all wanted to actually stay in this awful place. Then I said, "Oh, God, you're all serious. Look, I didn't get an epiphany, all right? This isn't fair." "Maybe yours is coming," Mason said. "We could use the help," Elvin said. I looked at Reg, and he just shrugged after a moment. Then I said, "Well, I guess it's nice to feel wanted for once, Reg." Then I just threw my hands up in surrender and said, "Look, I wouldn't enjoy a damn thing back home, wondering if you idiots got your brains kicked out. Should we ask Sid?" "Sid has no idea what's going on, and that's why he'll live to be 100, Mason said. "He likes it here," I said. "He's the only one who's gotten to inspect any medieval undercarriage since we've been here, I think." "Sid's always on the pull. Shagged your granny at your granddad's funeral, remember?" Mason said. "No, I haven't fucking forgot that, Mason," I sighed. "He was on her bucket list, and the opportunity presented itself. Thanks so much for uncovering that heretofore mercifully suppressed memory." "Any time," Mason said. In the movie version of this story, which frankly is the goal of this entire audiobook, the music would swell and thus would begin the training montage. Montages are super fun. You just break each thing into thirds, like horse riding. You know, at first I can't get on the horse. It bucks me off, bites me, pisses on me. Then the next 3 times, I'm up on the horse doing stuff. Then the next 3 things are me firing arrows and chopping the heads off of wooden dummies. But this was real training. So Mason had to work long hours with the young boys in the samurai style. Elvin worked with us on how to do splints and tourniquets and field dressings and such. And then we were all a little bit more ready to go get ourselves killed, but look really good while doing it. And this Princess Lillian was quite an impressive human being. She could ride, she could shoot. She was not half bad with a blade. She had grit. There was no way in hell Mason was ever going to get into those royal knickers. No way. And yes, I realize that by stating that outright, I've probably just made it inevitable that it will happen. Let's go over to Tristan and Elvin for a quick scene. "Now then, Sir Elvin, take a good run at me with that broadsword. Do your worst." It's useless," Elvin pleaded. "Can't run. Flat feet. Maybe if we raise these heels another 1.5 inches. At one point there was a loud whooshing sound from above. "Don't look up," Tristan shouted. "Ah!" Elvin screamed. "What in the name of Kor is that bloody thing up there?" "It cannot see us," explained Tristan. "Why can't it see us?" "Look, here. See this rope? Merlin's magic. As long as this line is unbroken, our enemies cannot see us." "Lovely. Protected from a painful and likely slow death by dragon by a bit of string," Elvin mused. "Rope," said Tristan. "And not just any rope. This rope cannot be severed by any weapon forged by man. Pick up your sword and let's keep at it." Elvin got better with the blade. So did I. Mason was working out by carrying heavy boulders and was getting bulked up. Our cell phone batteries were pretty much dead, but since I had shown Merlin how to play Tetris on my phone, he figured out a way to recharge the batteries with some sort of electricity spell. He was really getting into the games. Maybe a bad idea. Sid slept through the entire training process, waking only to bed some wench or other. He was in his element. Reg was entertaining one and all with his frighteningly accurate memory of Shakespeare's plays. It was starting to feel like a sleepaway camp. Loads of fun, actually. I even noticed Princess Lillian staring a little too long at Mason. Damn it, I knew I shouldn't have said anything about that. Anyway, this was a good time, but we all knew this would soon come to an end. One night, Tristan and Mason were out practicing a little archery, and Tristan skewered a big bug. But this bug was enormous and was clearly a spy for Morgana. She was watching us. They brought the thing to Merlin's tent. When they came in, Merlin was staring at one of the cell phones, and music was emanating from it. A catchy tune Mason knew but couldn't place. Actually, it was Tetris. "Merlin, we found something," Tristan said. Merlin seemed annoyed and confused, fumbled with the phone to turn it off. "What is it? What?" Tristan held up the strange bug. "This was near the camp perimeter." Merlin took it from him and inspected the thing. "This is no insect. 'Tis one of Morgana's spies. Time is short. We have to move," Merlin said. "On the run again?" Mason said. "What exactly does Morgana want?" "Excalibur is the key," Merlin said. "It is this she wants. With it, she can take the throne of Camelot, and her power will be absolute. This we cannot allow." "She seeks to rid the land of all people," Tristan said, "to return it to a time when it was green and pure." "All right, pretty serious," Mason said. "And where is Excalibur? Excalibur is not just a myth, I'm guessing?" "No man knows. Even with the help of her accursed ice dragon and the mighty Eye of Balor, it eludes her," Merlin said importantly. "Eye of Balor," Mason said. "Okay, you're introducing lots of new stuff here, but it's obvious what we have to do, right? Find Excalibur?" "Many have searched, and many have died. A hero's task awaits the one who seeks the Sword of Kings." "Right, so you have no idea where it is. I remember something about a Lady of the Lake." Tristan looked at Merlin as if to say, how does he know about all this? That is a perfect transition to join Sid for an important scene. Sid was relieving himself in a lovely clear stream, and suddenly he saw this. Keep in mind, I'm repeating a story told by Sid in a slurred English. Well, I presume it was English, since I don't think he speaks much else. So he was having a piss, and he sees the shining tip of a sword poking out of the water. And since he ignored it, or thought he was hallucinating, it came up further, held by a lady's hand. I know, right? It's the fecking Lady of the Lake we were just talking about, in the previous scene. Story structure's really clever, yeah? Anyway, she gives Sid the mother of all swords. Yeah, Sid. It just kind of figures that he would be the one to be given Excalibur. Anyway, this was about the time I stumbled across him out in the woods. I was walking downstream, and I spotted Sid playing with his new toy. Sid stabbed drunkenly in the air, did some sloppy slashing moves. I walked up to him and said, "Where'd you get that really bitchin' sword?" Sid mumbled something. "You found it in the pond?" I watched Sid thrashing around, getting a little too close with that blade you could cut through anything you could name. Then Reg came up over a little hill, saw me, then tried to go the other way, but when he saw that I saw him, he pretended he was going to join us. "What's Sid doing?" he said. "Reg, look what Sid found," I said. "Yes, nice," Sid said, slightly coherently. Then suddenly there was this electric zap that was pretty loud, and some lightning or whatever shot up into the sky. We all felt tingly after that. Then I said, "The hell was that? Looked like lightning came out of it." "You all right, Sid?" Reg said. What we had no idea of at the time was that Reg and I witnessed something amazing with that flash of electricity that shot up into the sky from Sid and the sword. But I'll let that unfold properly later in the story. But the problem with that was that we weren't the only ones that saw it. Apparently, Morgana's dragon also caught a glimpse of it, and knew exactly what had happened. Dragons look quite stupid, but they're quite the opposite actually. Make great pets, if not for their insatiable taste for scorched human flesh, and the fact that they would probably join a bunch of free trials for things and then forget to cancel them when the trial period was over. Sid started leaning on the sword and scraping around the mud with it. I said to him, "Sid, isn't that bad for a sword, sticking it into the dirt? I mean, I'm not much of an expert."
My sword. Marsh. 'Tis.
All right, then. Then, with a sound like a meteorite crashing to earth, something landed just beyond the tree line. Trees snapped and fell over as an enormous cloud of dust rose. Sid saw the dragon raise its head over the tree line. We all ran like the brave knights we aren't, but Sid stayed, ready to fight.
Come on, son of a bitch, Sid tried to say.
Come on, you wet-brained ass, Elvin shouted. Seconds later, Reg and me came screaming into the edge of camp. What the hell was that? Mason said. Dragon! It's a dragon, I said, all out of breath. What? Mason asked. Dragon! Stop shouting! It cannot see us here, Tristan said. Another stomp was heard, and we all started speaking in loud whispers. Merlin's magic keeps us hidden, Tristan said. Sid and Elvin are out there, I said. Wait, there they are. Hurry, Mason said. Yeah, watch out for those devastating sheets of ice that the dragon is belching forth, and that the poor people listening to this story can't see. It's true, you guys owe me. You would really have no idea that Elvin and Sid were dodging these huge and deadly ice bolts. Sid dropped the sword, and then barely got it back. But they dramatically make it through the perimeter of camp, and the dragon just stops, right there. Just like Tristan said. The dragon is like really confused, and we can't tell if it can see us, or if he can see us but just knows he can't do anything about it. Sid dropped his pants and bent over as far as he could and spread his cheeks right in the dragon's face, and that got no reaction at all, so I'm inclined to think the dragon couldn't see shit. Well then, 3 cheers for Merlin's security system, eh? Elvin said. Yep, 3 cheers, except for the fact that Sid picked up Excalibur and it tangled up in what he thinks is some random twine, so he cuts right through the very thing protecting everyone. The dragon suddenly sees us appear and takes to the air and starts puking out frozen stomach bile or whatever, and we run like hell and somehow make it to the center of camp. God be praised! Is this Excalibur? Tristan said. Tristan, run like hell! Sid cut the rope! I said. But how? The rope cannot be cut! It's Excalibur, I said. It must have its own override system vis-a-vis magic spells and the like. Right! Ah! Tristan screamed. Dragons landing on the camp. Nice knowing all of you, Mason threw in. A gigantic megaton burst thudding sound was heard, and the dragon was attacking random atmosphere NPCs who don't really matter to the story much. Princess! The dragon has found us! Penelope shouted, probably unnecessarily. It's after the sword! Sir Sid! Tristan cried. So you're thirsting, was what Sid said, whatever that meant. Sid tossed the Sword of Kings to Tristan and dove behind a woodpile. Tristan, for an instant, stunned by what he was holding, gathered his wits and ran for his horse, screaming. Take it back! I don't want it! So Tristan had Excalibur in his hands and was running like a lunatic. Princess Lillian saw what was happening and began rounding up children to get them into the underground storage areas. At least someone was thinking about the kids. The dragon was like laying waste to the whole village, breathing out thick sleet at random people. I mean, it was worse than when Australia beat American Samoa 31-0. I know you Americans have no idea what that means, but all the Europeans listening just had a good laugh. Anyway, the dragon nearly killed Merlin as he was coming out of his tent, so he was injured and out of commission for a bit, so they had no magic to help them, and it seemed like Tristan might be able to do something. He was on his horse with Excalibur. I yelled to Mason, Tristan has Excalibur! Excalibur? Mason said. I'll fill you in later, I said. I hope the kid can ride, Mason said. What do we do? I said. Well, Mason said, it's an ice dragon. What's the opposite of ice? Whiskey? I said. Let's try fire, Mason said. Sid, lighter! I was thinking fire too, I said. Yeah, mate. Sure, Frammer. Where is Lillian? Mason said. She's in the storage thingy with the kids, I said. Inside the storage thingy, Lillian brought another child down. Penelope corralled them together. Penelope, stay with them. I'm going up to see if I can find any more. Lillian was interrupted as Mason burst in, flying down the steps. Princess, I need some of that rot-gut liquor you keep down here. Is this really the time? Just give it to me. It's there. Thank you, kindly. Mason grabbed it and ran out. When he reached me, I said, Tristan's gone after the dragon with Excalibur. He's probably going to be a dragon appetizer if we don't do something. Let's horse up, Mason said. We gathered up our equipment and rode toward the action. Mason said,
Ricky, get Tristan to ride this way. I need a good shot. Putting on my narrator hat for a sec, this bit is really exciting because Tristan is playing hide and seek with the dragon, basically dodging blasts of sleet and cutting through the brush. At one point, the dragon actually gets stuck in some tight trees, and Tristan escapes by running under him between his legs. Or her legs, as Tristan later confirmed. But Tristan ran the wrong way, and was stopped by a deep ravine, and he couldn't find a place to cross. Now he was out in the open. A sitting duck, as the kids say. Or at least they did back in like 1912 or something. So Tristan, with his horse near collapse, bravely turned around and dismounted. He pulled Excalibur from its scabbard, a sword he was never meant to touch, and readied himself for the approaching dragon. The dragon leaned in, savored its apparent victory, jaws dripped, cold steam billowed from its maw. Tristan took a deep breath and tightened his grip on the Sword of Kings. He was prepared to meet his doom. Then, instead of attacking, the dragon leapt into the air with an ear-splitting shriek. And guess who was standing there behind the dragon with my sword? Yeah, I tipped it off there with my sword. Yeah, yours truly. With Sid sitting behind me, looking at his phone for some reason. Yeah, baby, right up the arsehole, I yelled, perhaps too triumphantly, as the dragon turned around to face me. Oh, shit. Yeah, hi, that was me back there. Hiya. I urged my horse on, and Sid and I rode away fast. I got close to Tristan and said, Tristan, toss me Excalibur. He did, and I caught it. It was lighter than I thought it would be. Sid, can you not grip onto my tits so hard? Yeah, waist is better. Where the hell is Mason? He's on my flits Grigmog. I truly hope that was not important information because I did not hear a fucking word you said. Actually, they all sounded like random syllables. Sort of. I did hear that. But anyway, Sid and I, somehow escaped getting skewered by the dragon again. I'd like to say it was because of my deft horsemanship, but it was really me flailing around, trying to stay on, while somehow keeping Sid from falling off. But we got to this dead end, and we were preparing to shuffle off our respective mortal coils and all. Then we heard this fwoom, and this flaming arrow went past us, and into the dragon's furry patch, and up she went in a flash, like an old Christmas tree covered in dried-up silly string. Then she took to the air and landed in the lake, and presumably went to the bottom, to hang out for quite a while. Steam rose up from the lake as the surface began to grow calm. Nice bloody shot, Mace, I said. Tristan arrived on his tired horse. Blood swipes ran across both of them, but they were okay. Suddenly, over the hill, steam rushed forward, enshrouding the clearing. Tristan said, We've not seen the last of him. Actually, it was a her. I got a closer look. Let's get back and help with the wounded. At the edge of the forest, the knights, battered and tired, were at the threshold of stepping out of the forest. Mason grinned and said, Gentlemen, prepare to be mobbed by grateful throngs. We emerged to the sound of the wind. If it was nighttime, it would be wind and crickets. They're saving it up big for later, I expect, Mason said. Cooking a goose or a giant hare, or whatever these people eat, when celebrating heroes. Right, let's get to it then. Things were trying to get back to something resembling normal, and I came upon Princess Lillian. Sir Ricky, can you help Sir Elvin with the wounded? Her voice trailed off as she saw Excalibur. It was just lying there in the dirt, next to Sid. She knew the blade, and it could be mistaken for none other. She fell to her knees in awe, almost in tears. If I could do a good impersonation of a woman crying, I probably would, but you'll have to use your imagination here. Excalibur, how can this be? Sid said a woman popped out of the water and handed it to him, I explained. No, it cannot be. Well, maybe it's some other sword, maybe, that Sid got from a magical woman in a stream. Why, Sid? We can weigh the significance of this later. Come with me now. Sir Elvin needs help. When we reached Elvin, he had a little hospital area set up and had enlisted the help of some of the young ladies to be nurses. Lillian saw one of the men's legs attached to a piece of wood and was perplexed. What is that? It's a splint, Elvin said. It'll keep his leg supported while it heals. Should be good enough until he can get an appointment with his primary care physician, I added. Are you ever not joking? Elvin said. I am not joking right now as I say this sentence, I said. Please stop talking, Lillian said. Where is Merlin? I took him to your tent, Elvin said. He's acting strange. Kept asking for my cell phone. Lillian thought nothing of it, but I was suspicious with that comment. I know there's no porn websites Merlin could be looking at, but who knows what Elvin had downloaded to his phone. We picked up Mason on the way because he seemed to always want to go wherever Lillian was. We entered Merlin's tent because we had knocked, or rather slapped, the door of the tent, and there was no answer. So we announced ourselves and came in, and as soon as I set foot in there, I heard it. It was that unmistakable and haunting theme from Tetris.
Merlin?
Lillian said. My God! How long had this man been playing Tetris? Mason said. Merlin looked gaunt and pale, and there were jars of urine and discarded food scraps on the ground with rats tugging at them.
Tetris?
Lillian said. Mason explained. Only one of the most addicting video games ever known to man. The scourge of the 90s. Then he said very quietly and cautiously, Merlin, give me the phone. No, Merlin said, and it sounded like a warning. Wait, Merlin, Mason pleaded. Just a few more minutes. I was about to just grab the phone when Mason stopped me. Don't, snapped Mason. I've seen this before. There's only one cure. We led the poor limping wretch outside. Take off his magician hat thing, Mason said. Why do they always wear odd hats, these wizards? Back home, when you see even a 40-year-old man with a beanie on, it's because he's losing his hair. There, let's get some sunlight on this poor devil. Merlin reacted like a vampire at first, but something deep inside of him seemed to know that this was the only way back. It burns, Merlin gasped. Oh God, don't be such a baby, Mason said. Look, the battery's finally running out. Can't believe it lasted that long. Oh, I can fix that, Merlin said. Merlin waved his hand, and there was a tingly whooshing sound. Mason looked at the screen and said, Back to full power. That is nothing short of amazing. Quite a trick there, Merlin. Merlin was starting to come around. He saw the destruction for the first time and said, What has happened to our encampment? My magic. It has failed. Why didn't I? Great gods, is that? Sid came wandering up to see what was happening. He had Excalibur resting on his shoulder, like Tom Sawyer would carry a fishing pole. Excalibur? Yeah, I said. I mean, we think so. Sid found it, and the dragon sort of missile locked onto it. May I hold it? Merlin asked. Sure, Sid said. Merlin grasped it and held it in front of him. He was in awe. He said, Lighter of darkness, the one that shows the way. Lillian interrupted and said, It would please me to know why the village idiot is to be the keeper of my father's sword. He was chosen, Merlin said. The blood of Arthur flows in his veins. Lillian gasped and said, We're related? Ah, Sid said. Morgana surely knows we're here now. We must move quickly, Merlin said. So with that, we packed up and went on the move. To where I had no idea. But I trusted that smarter people, mainly Merlin and Princess Lillian, had some idea. The procession moved along under the direction of the aforementioned smart folks. Mason, as usual, found himself walking next to Lillian. This time, she actually began a conversation with him. Sir Mason, I'm sorry I doubted you before. Can't say I blame you. My behavior has not been exemplary. They rode in silence for a moment. Yes, Mason was silent. For a whole moment. It was Lillian who broke it. Mason, what is the future like? He seemed to ponder the question before he said, Well, turns out the world is much bigger than you might think. So many people. Like the stars in the sky. And those little machines, the one Merlin fell in love with, they let us talk to any of those people anywhere else in the world, in an instant. And big machines that carry us almost anywhere else in a matter of hours. Billions of the loneliest people you could ever meet. Were you lonely? He paused. Never admitted it to anyone, but yes, I was. Actually, I think this is the longest conversation I've had with a woman in 6 years. Lillian laughed. Are the women beautiful? Indeed they are. Some things haven't changed. She chuckled softly again. Well, thank you for what you did today. It was brave. I was glad I could help. I hope to do better. Aw, that's nice. They didn't kiss or anything, so let me jump in and move the story along. I do have a feeling about those two, though. Anyway, we moved our camp, walked the entire day, and settled on a spot that Merlin chose, and we all hoped he chose correctly, and used magic in the process because none of us knew what the hell we were doing. Reginald and I were tidying up, putting away supplies and things, and then Reg, out of the blue decided to open up a barbed wire umbrella inside my arsehole. We're facing death at every turn here, and it's your fault. How's that? If I was never in that wretched television show and forced to say that stupid line, I'd never have been knighted. Reg, have you ever liked me? There was a rather longish pause. Then he said, Well, it's not that I don't, well... You know, I said, when I was 11 years old, my dad won tickets to Radio 3 to see you play Richard III at the RSC. I didn't understand one solitary word, but it was the greatest thing I had ever seen. The way you made people feel made me want to be an actor. He looked at me a long moment. You never told me that, Rick. We were then interrupted by an annoying ringtone. What the hell? I said. That better be our publicist, Reg said. Nope, it's Merlin. Who else could call me on a cell phone with no cell towers anywhere around for 1,000 years? I touched the answer button. Merle, talk to me. Yeah, I know. I shortened your name to indicate that, we're bros now. Never mind, Merlin. What do you need? Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. I ended the call and looked at Reg. Right. Apparently there is a meeting at Merlin's tent, and we are late. Sadly, we had to postpone our heart-to-heart sentimental convo and head over to Merlin's place, where we found all the key players waiting for us. Merlin motioned for us to sit, and he started speaking. I thank you all for coming. I will give some history for our newcomers, but they should know this already, as the history books no doubt have a full account. In his time, King Arthur vanquished many foes, none more dangerous than Morgana. Once a sea nymph, she had dominion over the oceans, but she traded it for immortality, and she became part of the land, never to return to the sea. No mortal weapon could harm her, but Excalibur was no mortal weapon. Arthur defeated and imprisoned her deep inside the earth. Sid rattled Excalibur playfully. Yeah, shrip, he sort of said. Mason shushed him and said, Sid, put Excalibur back in its sheath and listen to the man with the beard. Merlin sighed and cleared his throat, then continued. But Arthur was mortal, and time claims all mortal men. Arthur's heir was weak. He lost Excalibur, and with it, the power to keep the Knights of the Round Table together. Soon after, Morgana escaped. Without Excalibur, Camelot too disappeared, hidden in fog. Only Excalibur can show the way back. There was a pause, and then Mason broke the silence. So Sid can lead us to Camelot? He sank at the thought. Will that help? It's too dangerous, Lillian said. Only after Morgana is defeated do we dare return. Before we attempt to go back to Camelot, Merlin said, we must first defang the serpent. We need the source of her power. The Eye of Balor, Lillian said. Eye of Balor, got it, Mason said. Balor was a king of the ancient world, a giant even among giants. He could kill with a glance of his one hideous eye. When he was finally defeated, his eye was cut from his head and kept preserved as a trophy. No man can look on it without being struck by sheer terror. Armies who carry the eye before them are invincible. So, slip into Morgana's place, grab the eye, and get the hell out, Mason said. I like bullet points, sorry. Then I spoke up. What, dress up as sewage workers? Have a look at your dungeon, miss. Sounds like the opposite of smart. I'm all out of smart, Mason said. I did find some brave in one of my jacket pockets, though. Or was it stupid? Then Elvin sewed it all up. What's bravery but stupidity with purpose? I'm in. There was a solemn pause as the plan became clear. Well then, Reginald added, come the dawn, let's get stupid. We did some hurrahs and stuff, but we all knew it was dangerous as hell. But what were we going to do? This was serious. Dusk came, and Mason found Lillian standing there, being gorgeously bathed in the golden horizontal sunlight. She turned when she heard his footsteps. Sir Mason. Princess. He took her gently by the shoulders and pivoted her to face him. What are you doing? I'm getting ready for a leading man moment. Here, turn and face me like this. Good. Tomorrow, I'm leaving on the most dangerous quest of my life. How many quests have you been on? Roughly none.
This would be the first, so axiomatically, this is the most dangerous. I may come back dead, or not at all. Lillian pushed him away, but at least she did not yell rape or even seem all that angry. How can you say no? I'm Mason Grant. I'm the best here at everything, and I've only been here a week. You should be melting under my confident masculine gaze. I've spent a fortune at the finest research firms in London. I know exactly how charming I am. There's an index. Lillian scoffed. I like you, Lillian. It's a beautiful night. We're both gorgeous. Lillian actually laughed for real at that remark. And I'm scared, Mason added. You're the first knight I've ever heard utter those words. You're the first woman. Holy shit, the ground is moving. Mason looked down at his feet as a thick, furry patch of moss scooted out from under him, knocking him down. It began to swarm over him like an army of angry ants. Lillian quickly yanked him up and brushed him off. The moss teemed away, up a tree, and formed what appeared to be a leering face on the bark. What the hell is that? One of Morgana's tricks. She can make the plants do her bidding. I'm used to plants behaving themselves. Now I'm going to worry that my salad might take a swing at me. Come, we must rest. Oh? Mason said leeringly. Go to bed, your own bed. Tomorrow we rise early. She led him back toward camp, but he kept looking back at the spying green moss while brushing his legs nervously. The morning came and our tent was awash in a white noise of snoring, until Daddy Yankee's gasolina ambushed all of our ears. All of us fairly jumped out of our skins. Oh, lovely. Merlin figured out how to change the ringtones, I said. In the name of all that is good and holy, change it to something else, Mason said. How about O Fortuna, I said. Yes, that would be cracking, Mason said. We prepared in silence mostly after that. The weight of the mission was settling on us. We soon gathered in the field, preparing to ride out. Princess Lillian was all decked out in sort of this, I want to say devastatingly sexy, tight leather armor ensemble, and Mason was like drooling over her. Of course, he's not the only one drooling. I mean, does she have any idea how distracting she is with that getup? And then here comes Elvin on this bedazzled horse, festooned with pink and red ribbons and glittery handprints all over it. And then there's this golden unicorn horn glued to its snout. Can't say no animals were harmed during the making of this little adventure. Elvin was chewing up the scenery, all decked out in gold-flecked armor with his big oversized visor, prancing about, cantering, moving from side to side like some debutante. But it was really glorious the way I'm remembering it. So, Princess Lillian, you're coming with us then, Mason said. You won't make it far without me. Elvin, where did you learn to ride a horse like that? I said. Took lessons. Look, if I'm going out, it will be in style. It shall be said that no one can argue with that. Now let's ride, Mason said. Then Penelope ran over to us. Wait, I've made these for all of you. Penelope presented us with carefully crafted leather holsters for all of our cell phones. Now that is thoughtful. They are darling. Thanks, Penelope, Reg said. Look at the detail on these things, Mason said. Merlin brought reality back when he said, Be secretive. Move quickly. We rode out, and this time there actually was a little bit of cheering. We rode over the lush green hillsides, through rocky terrain, through the damp and dank forests, through deserted villages that were monstrously overgrown with all sorts of vines and flowers and thickets. What was Morgana up to with this, I wondered? Seemed like sort of a reclamation project. After most of the day, we were motioned to stop by Princess Lillian. She dismounted and indicated for Mason to follow her, and they went up the next hill, crouching low to the ground, as they peered over to the valley that lay ahead. Are we close? Said Mason. Down there, Lillian said. Looks like two of those green knights. What are they? They look like the half-man, half-tree or something. Morgana's men. Mason sighed and said, Well, it's whittling time. We dare not reveal ourselves this far out. We have to go another way. A shorter way? He asked, hoping to hear the answer yes. She could not help giggling when she said, You are strange indeed. Come. She led, we followed. It was a very circuitous route, and we stayed hidden most of the time. She stopped and surveyed another craggy pass, with a stream running along the bottom of it. This is the place, she said. That's a good solid mile of yucky grey cold mud and water. I hope that's water anyway, I said. It's not too deep, but we may run into trouble. Stay close together. Onward. She sloshed in, and we fell in line behind her. Mason was staring up at the sky when he said, "Could be a storm moving in. Look at the clouds over there. What is that, a castle?" "Not a storm. That is Camelot." "Are you sure we can't just pop over there and take it?" Elvin said.
"Morgana's army would descend upon us in full force."
"We'll stick to the undercover plan," Mason said. "Let's carry on through the bog. Gentlemen, secure those phones. I know none of you bought the insurance. I never do." We sloshed for a good hour, maybe 2. I'm not a good judge of that sort of thing. And there was this smell starting to assault our nostrils. I commented on it. "Mace, you know that homeless guy we were talking to outside Nobu that one time?" "Yeah." "It smells like that guy out here." "Oh my God, yes." "Shh," was Lillian's response. We sloshed for a while longer, and then Elvin spoke. "What's that?"
"What?"
Lillian said. "That rock was not there a second ago," he said. We were all silent for a tick, trying to remember if that rock had been there before. And then water began to splash everywhere, and something hideous emerged from the murky bog. "Jesus Christ!" Mason yelled. "Really, really, really big frog," I said. "Toad," Elvin said. "Thanks, Elvin. We do need to get that right for the cause of death on our autopsies," I said. Then there was immediate pandemonium and very loud ribbiting and swords being drawn. And I wish I could have stood back and captured this little scene on my phone. I mean, this thing leaped about 40 feet into the air and landed with its mouth right on top of Elvin and swallowed him in one gulp. After the initial shock and suppressed laughter, I mean, come on, we all surrounded this thing and began slashing and poking. Every passing second seemed bad for Elvin. It was trying to jump, but the extra weight of his recent meal was making that a bit difficult. And then it stopped and quivered a bit, and then let out a harsh groan, and then an ear-splitting shriek as Elvin's sword poked out the top, and then cut cleanly down its back. We were all bathed in blood as the thing fell away from Elvin, not unlike one of his old tearaway jumpsuits. Elvin was lying there, spitting and coughing, which is what everyone does in a movie after something like that. A lot of coughing.
"Are you all right, Sir Elvin?" Lillian said.
"Well, this suit is completely buggered," he said. "You said trouble, Your Majesty, but a clear warning about oversized carnivore amphibians might have been helpful."
"My apologies, Sir Elvin."
Elvin took a deep breath. "Oh, it's not your fault. One can never be sure how one will react to that sort of thing," Elvin said. "It gets easier each time, friend," I said. "I suppose I look like dessert in this wild get-up," Elvin said. "Lesson learned," Mason said. "Go light on the tassels and streamers next time, right? Right. Let's move on." And so we trudged onward for what could have been 12 minutes or 2 hours, not sure. But finally, here we are coming into what the writers want to call Act 3. And I'm going to call it Chapter 3. We were soon peering through the tall weeds at Corbenet Castle, the place where the freaking Holy Grail is supposed to be. And we are to pop in and nab it and take it home with us. Yeah, I keep saying this, but probably going to be the place where we all die. This structure was ominous. Twin spires, but half of it is caved in with an enormous green tree like one of those giant sequoias, but taller, bursting out from one of its sides, and taller than the castle itself, and menacing. I mean, I'd rather try to break into Mel Gibson's compound, but this is where my life's choices have led me, so what are you going to do? After we had all gotten an eyeful of this scene, Lillian said, with some dread,
"Corbenet Castle."
"It's, pretty," Mason said. "Pretty scary," I said. "Bet there's some lizard wombat thing waiting in there to jump out and tear my eyelids off."
"We're not going that way. See that rocky path leading down and away from the castle? That will actually lead us right back inside. I used to play there as a child."
"With all those sharp rocks?" Elvin said. "Child Protective Services would shit themselves." We followed her around to the spot. She stopped a few times. I began to wonder if she'd forgotten the way.
"This is it,"
she said.
"It still looks unused. I doubt they know of it. The entrance is between those 2 gargoyle statues."
Then Mason stepped out dramatically in front of us and began to speak dramatically. "All right, soldiers, stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood." "Oh, God," Reginald said. "Henry V? Movie stars. Have you ever set foot on a stage, Mason?" Mason went on, enjoying Reginald's jab. "Set the teeth and stretch the nostril wide. Hold hard the breath and bend up every spirit to his full height. On, you noblest English.
Set your cell phones to airplane mode and cry God for Guinevere, England, and Princess Lillian.
I see what you did there, Mace. Like it, I said.
Lillian sighed. The future seems a silly, silly place that I hope never to visit.
Well, going into this castle is probably the best way to never get to the future, I said. Last chance to check it out. Anyone? No? All right then, after you. I waited as everyone passed by into the passage, where there were some big gargoyles carved into the wall just inside the passageway. Oh, don't do that, Sid. Why do you have to go touch everything? You want a selfie with the gargoyles? Okay then. Sid actually did take a photo next to one of those things. Sid was the gargoyle on the left if you see the pictures. I guess him touching it caused the trouble. Or maybe it was the flash photography, which always seems to be prohibited in places like this. No! Lillian cried out. The ground shook and crumbled. Rocks fell from the ridge toward the place we came in from. Mason hurled himself on top of Lillian. Everything settled pretty quick, but there was no going back out the way we came.
What do you think you're doing? Lillian said.
Protecting you from bodily harm.
You can get off of me.
Mason got off of her. Then we heard Reginald from up ahead.
A trap. There were vines blocking the other end, thick as tree trunks. Now what?
They're just plants, I said. Of course, just as I said that, one of the gargoyles' faces bent down and put its nose right up against mine. There was a bird-shaped gargoyle and a cat-shaped gargoyle, and this was the bird-shaped one. And these things are both, I don't know, like 8 feet tall, and they had like muscles made out of stone, and these rope vines twisted around them acting like tendons or something. It was really, really interesting, if I were, say, watching it on the telly,
instead of it trying to grab hold of me and squirt my brains out onto the floor.
The cat gargoyle came charging up the stairs while the bird one popped down to where we were. Me and Reg jumped out of the way. But it was going to land right on Lillian, but then Mason comes out of nowhere. He pulls her out of the way. He probably landed on top of her again, which seems to be his thing. Both gargoyles were smashing their big fists against the ground, but we were all just able to get out of the way. Chips of rock were flying everywhere. There was this one point where Sid, God bless him, decided he wanted to take a break from the fight like it was some video game. And he was like leaning there on Excalibur like a cane, and I saw both of the gargoyles homing in on Sid, and they crouched, and then they both pounced. So I was getting pretty good with a bow and arrow, and I zinged an arrow right at Excalibur, knocking it out from under Sid, and he fell right when both gargoyles reached him, and they crashed together in a big pile of sticks and vines and rocks. You know, this sucks that you can't see this stuff, and I have to like explain it to you, because I pretty much am like the Senator Mitch McConnell of storytelling, like so boring. Not sure why they asked me to do this, but I'm the one you have to listen to, so let's just get through this, yeah?
Ricky, that shot almost makes up for Series 3,
Reginald said.
What's wrong with Series 3?
You look quite dashing with the bow like that, Rick, Elvin said. Thanks, Elvin. I was getting an awkward, flirty vibe from him, so that was weird. Come on, Mason said. As we walked past the broken pieces of bird and cat gargoyle, I could see the red eyes glowing, still watching. That was how Morgana could keep track of us. She was watching through all the eyes of all her little creatures. Speaking of that, we should pop over and see what she's doing right now. She was actually watching us, like I was saying. There was an image of us projected up from the water of what looked like a really expensive bird bath from Crate and Barrel, and she was talking to Guinevere.
They've brought it to me, Gwen. The Sword of Kings. Look.
Guinevere looked and saw us in the water. Then she said to Morgana,
5 knights armed with the soul of England. You've lost, sea witch. Your faith in them seems misplaced. Look, fair Lillian is with them. You'll soon be reunited with the little princess.
Now this is when Morgana did something that requires explanation. You might ask, how, Ricky, do you know about things like this that happened when you weren't present to witness it? And I say to you, mind your own damn business. Do you want to hear a story or not? So Morgana whipped her fingernail across Guinevere's forehead and made a little gash, and then she put a mouth over it, and a little thorn came out of Morgana's mouth and entered the wound. Then Morgana let go, and Guinevere's eyes just went completely blank and wide. Lines of root and vine thickened under her skin and pushed out like new green veins into her face and neck. What the hell was that? Anyway, back to the rest of the troops making their way through the dark passages of Corbennet Castle. We were following Lillian because we had no idea which way we should be going.
Now, where are you, little passageway?
Lillian was saying to the passageway.
No signs anywhere to help anyone out. It's like driving in Los Angeles. Worst signage of any major city.
Shh, Lillian said. Marking a secret passageway as such would seem to defeat the purpose, Sir Reginald.
Then I said, idea. We split up, get lost, and get disemboweled by giant dung beetles. Who's with me? Look at your torch, Princess, Mason said, and actually had noticed that the flame was leaning a little bit in one direction. The flame wants to go this way. Let's oblige it. Lillian looked at the flame and then at him for an extra second and said,
This damp air is making you smarter.
But just then we started hearing more noise coming from the way we had just come.
Shit! New foes approaching, Elvin said.
I pulled out my sword, ready for something I was clearly not ready for. Reg saw me and did the same. We're leaving, everyone, Mason said. Reg backed up to my back, his sword out, waiting. Look, guys, Mason was still saying. Just shut up, Mason. Let someone else be a hero, Reg said. Right. Stay alive, Mason said. Mason and the others ran up the stairs, and they could hear a fight starting at our position. Mason slowed and said, Let's go back.
We have to keep going. They know what they're doing,
was Elvin's answer.
Elvin is right. We must move on.
Sid started wandering off down some unauthorized path, and Mason stopped him and said, Sid, do you have any speed that is faster than leisurely strolling? I'm all right, Sid kind of said.
Let him go. He'll find us. He always seems to stumble into something interesting. Great skill to have, really, Lillian said.
They left Sid to do his thing, and Sid very soon found himself in a lovely part of the castle depths. He heard soft whispering, not scary whispering. It was like nice whispers that seemed to be beckoning him. Sid mumbled something, and then he began to hear what oddly sounded to him like choir voices singing. We'll get back to Sid. Let's join Reg and I actually having a scuffle with some of those green knights. We were doing all right, so either Tristan's training leveled us up or Morgana's training was shit. How come we didn't get any of those handy termite hand grenades? I shouted. Shut up and fight, Reg yelled. So these bad guys were really just slaves to Morgana, so they were probably just trying to keep busy so they didn't get in trouble with the boss. And I was just thinking those thoughts when this woman slipped into the room, almost danced into the room like a ballerina. She slipped in between our sword swipes as if she saw them in slow motion or something. And then that's when it happened. She moved quietly right up behind your humble narrator and shivved me. It was a big wooden spike that shot out of a palm like Spider-Man does with webs, but this thing buried deep inside and did quite a number on enough of my vital organs to send me to my maker. I felt it go deep inside. I looked into her eyes, and I knew that moment that Bob was definitely not my uncle, and that I would never play the bagpipes again. Reg saw what had happened and let out a pained cry of, No! Reg saw me drop to the floor, and he came at Morgana with a rage I've never seen in the man. He slashed through both of the greenies we were fighting, and as they fell, she ran up the stairs. But before he could reach her, a tornado of wasps came out of her other palm and swarmed him. He fell back as the wasp cloud blew him down the steps, right on top of me. She disappeared as quickly as she had appeared. I was still alive enough to make an oof sound as Reg landed on me.
Steady on, Reg.
Come on, Rick. Up we go. Hey, Reg. She put it in sideways. And I laughed pretty hard for a guy who was about to die. Mate, let's go. Hey, I'm dying as fast as I can. No, Merlin is far away, I said. You can't die, Rick. I sputtered a bit and then said, Reg, did you really hate the show? He chuckled. I actually binge-watched the entire show on Netflix last month. I was mainly watching you, Rick. You are... His voice was shaky. One of the greats, Rick. So I guess my secret's going to be safe now, eh? Ha! I knew it, I groaned, and then I died for real. Rick? Ricky? There was a long, long pause. The longest pause ever for me, in fact. But it won't affect my hosting duties. Fear not. Elvin and Mason and Lillian were still on the move. Light was coming from an opening up ahead of them. The floor was wet and slimy with damp moss, which was making Elvin grimace. I had to wear my suede boots, didn't I? Elvin said. Shush. Mason was looking up ahead where the opening was getting wider. I think it's down there.
Down there was a courtyard where a troop of 6 green knights were gathering together. "What's down there?" Elvin said. "The Eye of Balor," Mason answered.
It's unattended, Mason?
"No, there's some guards. Oh, what's this?" Down below, at the foot of the pedestal, 5 of the knights were listening to the dark green knight, who was giving orders. Then they split up. 3 groups of 2, and they all left the room. "They've gone," Mason said. "I'll go. Cover me?"
Whatever you do, do not look at it, Mason.
"Right. Wait, where's Sid? He ever come back?" Mason asked.
No.
"Well, text him, Elvin. Let's go grab this thing. Then we need to collect Sid on our way out." Elvin sent a text to Sid, then followed Lillian, who was following Mason. They ambled down into the courtyard via a pile of rocks. Then they were at the pedestal. Mason touched the covered eye. "Ew, it's warm. Is it supposed to be warm?"
I'm not really an expert. Maybe. It is a living thing.
Ugh. He held it away from him a bit, then realized that that was not going to work if he had to carry it for any distance. "Elvin, did you text Sid?"
Yes,
Elvin said.
someone's coming,
Lillian cried out nervously.
Hello, Ricky Winsleydale here from Beyond the Grave, still narrating. Hope this isn't too awkward, but we need to get back to what was happening with Sid. It seems Sid had fallen through part of the floor underneath the castle and landed in a pile of mud and rock. After he came to what little senses he has, he gathered up Excalibur and found himself standing near a stone pedestal staring at a lovely golden chalice. A text message came through just then. He checked it, rolled his eyes, and put the phone away. He ignored the choir music that seemed to be wafting through the room from an invisible source, grabbed the chalice, and held it under a trickle of water that had just been created by the ceiling that he'd caved in, and drank from the cup. He hardly noticed the green lightning bolt that jolted through his body before he set the Holy Grail back onto the pedestal, hoping no one would notice that it had been moved. His eyes could suddenly see much more than he could before in this dim room, and all around him, down the passage, were glorious statues of knights, each glowing as beautifully as the Grail. Sid stumbled forward and headed toward the obvious exit. On the floor were raised tiles, each with glowing letters spelling out Aramaic words that no one, not even Morgana, could likely read. Sid stepped heavily onto the first one, and pew! An arrow shot out of the wall and plowed right through his neck, in one side and out through the other. But instead of bleeding out, the wound closed right up. He swatted at it, thinking it to be a mosquito. He took a few more steps, setting off another trap, which involved a giant axe, which swung down like a pendulum and sliced him right in half. But he zipped right together again before he could take notice. Undaunted, mainly because he hadn't even caught on yet, another step released another trap. A mesh screen shot up and slapped him like a fly swatter, chopping him into 240 small cubes. The Lego Sid wobbled a moment, almost falling to pieces, then fused back together. If Sid had noticed that he was now immortal, he was certainly taking it well. He continued on through the next 7 traps, unfazed, and found his exit. Now over in the courtyard, Mason and Lillian and Elvin were dealing with 2 more green knights. They backed away as the knights came forward, until they were behind the dais that had previously contained the Eye of Balor. Mason put it back on the pedestal, figuring correctly that it would hamper his fighting abilities. "Tristan took out 2 of those guys on his own, with no backup," Mason said. "They aren't as tough as they look." Mason charged at them, hitting the first one with a double front kick, Captain Kirk style, and sent one knight to the floor. His next sword strike, at the other knight, did not go as well. His sword became lodged into the knight's wooden chest. The knight yanked the sword from Mason's hands. Mason held up a finger like a time out and ran back to Elvin and Lillian and said, "Turns out they're a bit tougher than one might imagine. Here they come. Elvin, quick, your sword."
Here. What are we doing, Mason?
"You go, I stay."
That's suicide, Elvin said.
"Maybe not. Well, probably. Go," Mason urged. Mason stepped out in front of the dais and faced the 2 knights. "Come on, you treasy bastards," he shouted. He raised his sword high and readied for an attack, but behind him, Lillian tugged on the cloth covering the Eye of Balor and slipped it off. It was the size of a bowling ball, yellow, veiny, bloodshot, gross, awful, and scary. The 2 green knights froze, dropped their swords, and ran away screaming uncontrollably. "Ha!" Mason said. "Looks like somebody is as intimidating as he is charming." Then he turned around.
"Don't!" Lillian shouted.
But the warning was a smidge too late because Mason turned around and locked eyes with the Eye. The blood drained from his face, and he dropped his sword and ran squealing in fear, passing by the fleeing Green Knights on his way to just some other place that didn't have an Eye of Balor in it. While Mason was still running, Sid was still trying to find his way back to the others, although if you asked him, he could not tell you why that was important. He was dragging Excalibur along, making sparks on the stone floor and making a terrible racket, when he spotted this enormous crack in one of the walls, with a large plant growing from it. He did what most people would do, of course. He got out his lighter and tried to smoke it. Perhaps it was a defense mechanism on the part of the plant, but a new vine burst out from the wall with a bell-shaped flower and rather phallic-shaped stamen in its center. Sid leaned in to give it a sniff, and poof! The thing blew some yellow powder into his face. This must have been the most powerful substance in the world, because Sid was already just about immune to all major hallucinogens and opiates before he became immortal. But this puff of yellow dust sent him into a beautiful land of kaleidoscopic colors and traces. Sid saw the wall spread open further, revealing a lush green tunnel lined with flowers and all manner of ferns and moss. Sid walked into the tunnel, following wherever it might lead. Behind him, the wall closed up without a trace. Now back to Mason, who's still running from the Eye of Balor. He was running alongside the other two frightened Green Knights, and they all seemed to be coming to their senses at the same time. They all slowed to a trot, and then stopped. Mason bent down and put his hands on his knees, catching his breath. Then he said to the other knights, "How about that eye thing, huh? Whew! Scared the shit out of me." "Indeed, I know not what came over me," one knight said. "Don't talk to him. We need to bring him to Morgana," the other knight said. "What? Wait a tick! We just had a bonding experience, did we not? I mean..." That was the sound of Queen Guinevere's vine-ripened hand around Mason's throat. Mason lost consciousness and came to just as he was traveling toward a stone floor, which he struck very hard. They all had been captured, including Sid, and brought back to the pedestal where the Eye of Balor was once again resting. Morgana was there too. Mason yelped as he hit the floor.
Ow! There's a rug right there, and you dropped me on the stone... Lillian? Mason quickly surmised that they had all been captured. "I see you found Sid," Mason said.
And he saw my body laying there. "Ricky."
God, Ricky.
"Hey!" He tried to struggle as thick vines wrapped themselves around him. He was now a prisoner like the rest of them.
Sir Mason Grant, allow me to present Morgana, Lillian said.
"Queen Morgana," Morgana said.
How did you get that's a snazzy sword you've got there, madam.
Morgana looked quizzically at Lillian and said, "Where did you find such an array of astonishingly inept men, Lillian? I'm surprised only one of them was killed. Thus far. How can I thank you all for this unexpected gift of all gifts, the sword of kings, now the sword of a queen?" "Where is she?" Lillian said.
Who? Oh, you mean Gwen? I will fetch her at once. Gwen!
The sounds of tiny footfalls approached from a passage. Lillian turned as much as the spiky thorns at her neck allowed her to. Then she gasped. "What have you done to her? What have you done to all of them? They look like, well, plants," Lillian said. "She's almost done. Usually it's a long process, peeling back layer after layer of skin." Morgana held Excalibur out to Guinevere and said, "Here you go, darling. You recognize this weapon, no doubt? Now feed it with the blood of Arthur." Guinevere took the weapon and was preparing to do as she had been told.
"Mother," Lillian said. "You've failed, Morgana," Mason said, and Morgana glanced at him and said, "Kill this one too." "I've seen the future. You lose, Morgana." Then Mason stood up as menacingly as he could manage. The Green Knights shouted, "He's loose!" Mason said, "Played Houdini in a Channel 4 miniseries. Everyone look!" Got to hand it to Mason here. He ripped the cover off the Eye of Balor, and everyone crapped themselves, because they all looked at it, except Morgana and Mason. Then Mason grabbed Excalibur in the confusion and thrust it into the Eye of Balor. Morgana reached out and tried to grab the passing blade. Not sure what the hell she was thinking, but instead of stopping it, it sliced right through her wrist and cut off her left hand and buried itself into the middle of the eye. Morgana cried out, "No!" Well, then it was deathly quiet for just a second, and then a low rumbling from deep under the castle, then a wet popping sound as the Eye of Balor flattened into an icky pile of putrid goo. Then the rumble got louder, and it seemed like perhaps it wasn't such a hot idea to be inside the castle any longer. Morgana became disoriented, as if she was feeling the castle's pain or something. Then she stumbled into a hole that had opened up with all the rumbling and shaking. Mason pulled Excalibur from the gooey mess and hopped down from the pedestal and saw Morgana's severed hand. But it looked odd, like a jellyfish, all translucent and slimy, so he decided against taking that souvenir. Mason was about to cut through all the vines that were holding everyone, but they were all still screaming in terror from seeing the eye. He waited and helped them through a few quick breathing exercises, which seemed to help. Then he was able to cut them loose. At that moment, half the room caved in. Mason bent over to hoist up my body, and Elvin, still shaking from the eye's effects, got to his feet. "Mace, he's dead," Elvin said. "Dead or not, he's coming with us. Everybody, follow me." Reg and Elvin helped Mason load my lifeless corpse onto his shoulder, and they all ran out with me. The place was falling apart around them. Boulders and rocks were missing them, sometimes bouncing off of them. Some seemed to hit Sid straight on and smash into bits, which the others thought they must have imagined. But that happened. They were almost out, but a taller, darker Green Knight was waiting at the portcullis, looking, on average, more angry and tougher than the others have been. Mason transferred me to Reg's shoulder and charged the big knight. "Gotta clear some brush," Mason shouted. "Godspeed," Reg said. "Ah!" Elvin shrieked. "Get a hold of yourself, Elvin. It wasn't that scary." "I think that was the last one," Elvin said. Mason was possessed, a man no longer fearing for his own life, a warrior who could do anything. He jumped high into the air, coming down toward the tall Green Knight. Excalibur poised in front of him, but the Green Knight did not move, did not even react. Mason landed next to him, lifted up its visor to peer inside. When he let the visor fall, the tall knight simply fell over. Everything here was dying. Everything was connected in some way. Crashing noises came from the castle. "It's coming down! Keep running," Reg said. And he was right. The whole thing was imploding. Mason kept turning, looking for Lillian, but he couldn't see her anywhere. Pausing to search for her seemed less of a priority than was getting out of the way of the million tons of jagged falling rocks. Mason made it to the rotting drawbridge first, stepped on a bad plank, and went tumbling. Then the sun went out for a moment. It was the dragon, still singed from the previous fight. Mason braced himself, waiting for the toasting, but it didn't come. Instead, the dragon flapped away, leaving them with merely an annoyed shriek. There was a great cracking sound, and the unimaginably tall tree that had grown up through the middle of Corbennet Castle was on its way down. Unfortunately for Mason, it was heading right for him. He could only go one way, to the end of the drawbridge to catch up with Reg and dead me. And it was the damnedest thing, like right out of the cinema, but the top of that tree just nicked Mason on the ass as he scrambled off the drawbridge, just in time to save his skin. In the silence that followed, the men looked at each other. "I failed, mates. The princess, the queen. I didn't have what it took," Mason said. "We all failed," Reginald said. "Oi," said a voice. Mason looked up at Sid, not surprised to see him unhurt. "Is that Sid?" Reginald said. "They're all gone, Sid," Mason said. "Oh," Sid asked. "Where were you?" Mason said. "I had to carry the birds out. Where's me sword?" "What?" "Sword." "Here," Mason gave it to him. "Not sure what you need it for." "Makes me look cool," was Sid's answer. "You had to carry the birds?" Mason said. "What birds exactly? And why can I suddenly understand you? Adrenaline detox, I guess?" "Dunno. Probably." "Or did you start recently feeling fear, and therefore adrenaline, as a result of heightened awareness brought about naturally after this enforced sobriety?" God, that sounds like a line from that one where I played the prison psychiatrist who supplied drugs to the female prisoners in exchange for... "Sid, that's Lillian over there. And that's Guinevere." Mason ran to them. "Our birds," Sid said. "I get it, Sid. Just don't tell them what birds means back home, yes?" "And don't you tell me either," Lillian said weakly. "But he did save the both of us, so he can call us whatever he likes." "Within reason," Guinevere said. "Don't speak, Mother. She's in and out of awareness, like a fog." "She'll make it," Mason said. "She's dying, Sir Mason. I know it." "But Merlin could..." "We haven't time. If we had horses..." Sid scoffed and said, "Gotta do everything around here." Sid put his really, really dirty fingers into his mouth and whistled. "Jesus, Sid," Mason said. Then there was the clip-clop of hooves approaching. The hooves were attached to horses, which was even more convenient. "Voila, Dalio, or whatever," Sid said, astonishingly understandably. And with that began the last rising montage of this story. It reminded me of that scene in Excalibur where they ride past all the dead plants and they grow back, and that amazing music by Carl Orff. Da 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 da, tsh, da 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 da, tsh. Yeah, like that, but not enough like it for us to get sued or anything like that. It was just like all the stuff that had been overgrown and taken over by plants and moss and things was starting to be revealed as Morgana's powers weakened. The floor was losing its grip, or so it seemed, as the triumphant group rode back into temporary Camelot. Tristan stood to greet them.
Sir Mason! Sir Elvin! Ricky!
We won, Tristan. We won, Mason said.
The Queen!
She is very sick, Mason said.
Quickly, we must get her to Merlin, Tristan said.
Mere minutes later, Merlin was standing over Guinevere, finishing up with his magical works. Then he said,
She should survive, although I cannot tell if she will be thankful for it. Her mind was greatly tormented.
Her mind is strong. I never met its equal, Lillian said.
'Tis true. And what of Morgana?
Merlin said. Dead, Mason said.
And the Eye of Balor?
Bit of a snag there. It melted, Mason said.
Melted?
After I stabbed it with Excalibur, yes. Don't look at me like that. It all worked out, sort of. While they spoke, wind howled through the gaping blackness that had once been Corbennet Castle, and something began to stir ever so faintly, deep down inside of it. While that stuff was stirring, over at Merlin's tent, which had become the newly created mobile Camelot outpost, preparations were made to try and bring Guinevere back to the land of the conscious. Tristan and Lillian set up sprigs of herbs and other nice-smelling things. Then they lit some incense, which put out green smoke. Merlin began to whisper in some ancient tongue. Then the smoke began to glow as it spread over Guinevere's body. It was like watching a beautiful, misty X-ray machine. All of the Queen's insides were illuminated, the veins, the bones.
Merlin sighed and said,
The poison is too deep, like thorns wrapped around her heart. Too dangerous to draw out.
What can we do? Lillian said.
Nothing. This magic is strong. Morgana still lives. If she wants the Queen dead, she could make it so.
I'll stay with her, Lillian said.
No,
Merlin said.
She needs... Your people need their leader. Help them celebrate their victory,
Merlin said.
Lillian exhaled deeply and said,
All right.
Later, Tristan sat on a wooden stool, observing the party and revelry that had begun. Lillian saw him and came up behind him. He spoke to her without turning his head.
Look, a bonfire, and that roasted pig. And I think I see Penelope dancing. Alone, Lillian said.
Yes, was his lame answer. She gave him a second or two and then said,
Go and join her, silly boy. Dance.
As you wish, my lady. The princess walked through the camp, smiling and encouraging the festivities for a while, but she was brought back to reality when she saw the future knights gathered on a nearby hill, arranging stones into a cairn. That's a pile of rocks, thanks Perplexity. In this case, the guys were doing like a funeral rock pile thingy. Pretty nice of them to bother, I thought. It's not often that you get feedback from the actual cadaver, so I thought I'd throw that in. Lillian joined them and stood somberly as Mason placed my sword next to me. Then she, and I totally knew this was going to happen, she held out her hand for him to take.
Would the victorious knight honor me with a dance?
He will indeed, Mason said. They all danced and revelled some more. Mason had to keep checking himself when he'd get too close to Lillian. Medieval princesses had different rules as far as proximity while dancing. He actually found it to be the most fun he'd ever had dancing. How would I know that? Well, I am sharing duties with an omniscient narrator, sort of like AI, but this version is never wrong. Meanwhile, Reginald had found a group of kids who wanted to hear about our recent heroic deeds. Let's see what he's on about. And then, right before the thing of stone and wood crashed down, Ricky the Brave leapt without a thought for his own safety and pulled me out of danger. Oh, damn. That was kind of sweet, really. I think I've got something in my eye. Oh, and Elvin was giving one of the musicians a few tips on the modern style of playing the lute. He was strumming and tuning, and one of the lute players said, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then a wonderful cover tune burst forth. It took me a second to recognize through the Renfair fluttery tones, but it was Thin Lizzy's The Boys Are Back in Town. I hope we can secure the rights for the movie version, because this is just perfect. I won't sing it, but part of it goes, Guess who just got back today? Them wild-eyed boys who had been away. Haven't changed, haven't much to say, but man, I still think them cats are crazy. Now let's go back to Lillian and Mason.
So, you will go then?
Merlin can reopen the waters of time. You'll go back home?
Yes, I hate to imagine what my Insta page looks like right now. If I would have said that a week ago, I'd have meant it.
She mused.
You have no idea what the hell I'm talking about, and I like that. I'm not sure what I'll do. I know I'll never forget what we did here, or this moon, or you.
It's the most lovely moon in a long time. What are you looking at? How do you plan to ruin this romantic...
She looked in the direction he was looking at and said,
What is that dark spot on the moon?
That's what I'm wondering. It's moving. And then the spot made an ear-splitting roar that stopped the party in an instant.
Dragon!
Lillian shouted. This is a really expensive movie moment involving thousands of slave labor hours in one of those countries that Hollywood farms out its CGI special effects to. Smashing. Anyway, the dragon actually froze this raging bonfire and landed right in the middle of the flame-shaped icicles, 'cause it was like so cold it froze the actual flames in place. Cool, yeah? Except the dragon's going to kill everyone in sight, right? Nope. It didn't do that. Instead, it lowered its head, real slow-like, and that evil slunt Morgana came strolling very regally down the dragon's neck and stepped off its head. She was clad in a black cloak, and I shouldn't say this, but she was quite fetching, even though she is evil squared. The knights drew their weapons. Some brave peasants grabbed whatever they could to fight with. Others ran away. Morgana only smiled at the swords pointing her way. She spoke with authority and expected to be obeyed.
I wish to bargain for the life of the Queen, she said. Bargain? Lillian spat. Who would trust the likes of you?
Mason did not say this out loud, but he was thinking the following. Oh, we so need my agent here right now. Deadly negotiator, that one. He would grind up her bones and sprinkle them over his frappuccino. Guy's a monster. Before he had his stroke, that is. Then he said out loud, Let's hear what she has to say.
Very well, then, Lillian said.
Morgana parked the dragon and left it running, but no one was going to mess with that thing. They led her to Merlin's tent, and let's jump in there and see what's happening.
Morgana, Merlin said, what is going on in that twisted thing you call a mind? You've done enough. Look at the Queen. This is your doing.
Tristan, Lillian said, if she twitches a finger in a way that dissatisfies you, her head comes off. Yes, ma'am.
Then Merlin said,
Speak, witch.
Morgana chuckled softly at the slight. Merlin had said it with such disgust.
The Queen can live, for a price. You're in no position to bargain, Lillian said.
It is a sad thing, but in fact she is. What do you want? Merlin said.
The future.
Mason guffawed spontaneously and then said, You can have it. She'll get lost in the tube first trip. Die of sun starvation. Modern England will eat her alive.
If the future men of England are anything like the buffoons standing before me, it will be mine for the taking. Time has so weakened their bodies and minds, there will be no one to stop me from ridding the world of this plague on 2 legs called man.
Yeah, well, these buffoons just destroyed your castle and defeated your army, and they're not going to let you destroy the Hey, come back here, I'm talking to you! Morgana was actually walking away, laughing. Mason was nonplussed. Then he said, She is a witch, just walked away right in the middle.
Mace, you really want to send her off to England? Elvin asked.
She won't have any powers in the future. That's all mythic stuff that only these people believe. She gets her power from their belief. Right?
Not my area of expertise, or yours, Elvin said.
Dead Ricky here, with another expensive, well-lit scene to describe. The moon was out real bright, and the dragon scratched out a huge trench with her hind claw. The dragon gave Mason a dirty look as she escorted Morgana and Merlin to the trench. Mason stuck his tongue out at the dragon, but the meaning was probably lost on the creature. Probably better for Mason now that I think of it. Morgana stepped into the trench, and Merlin pulled a flask from his belt and poured into the trench the waters of time. Just a few drops, and then a swirling mist began to form, and Morgana sort of settled down into it, fanning it toward her with her hands. Morgana sniffed at the swirling stuff, and a tendril of glowing mist reached up toward her. Then she bit the inside of her mouth hard and spat blood into her hand. What the... Hey, she knows what she's doing, I guess. The blood swirled about, and then formed a small rose with one thick and very angry-looking thorn sticking out of it. She looked at Merlin.
Prick the Queen with this, and it will devour my poison, Morgana said.
Take it, Lillian.
If this doesn't work, Lillian said.
By the way, Morgsy, Mason said,
When crossing the streets in London, you don't need to look for oncoming traffic. They'll see you. And in the tube, you wait for the train on the tracks. Just some tips.
Your words mean nothing. Modern England will soon bow to me.
With that last insult, she fell back into the swirling fog like it was a swimming pool at a rave. The dragon gave Mason one last mad dog stare and jumped in after her. The fog rose up to engulf her, and after a flash of lightning, all was quiet again.
So, Merlin, you sent her back to the Jurassic period, right? To get eaten by a dinosaur? Elvin said.
She alone decided her destination. She's going to our home, and we are going after her, Mason said.
I'm coming, Lillian announced.
Guinevere needs you. So do your people. And we're taking Merlin. It's about time he does something around here. Mason had said it in a final tone that left no argument, and Lillian submitted. I may not be able to return. The gap will close soon.
They need you, Merlin.
Lillian turned toward Mason. They both realized this was goodbye. They looked at each other for a long moment. Ah, this is it. Here comes a big romantic kiss. But Mason took her hand and kissed it tenderly instead. Then he stepped back. We go back, now, for England, he said. Cue that battle music in your heads. That last line gave me like chills a little bit. And being an Englishman, I got just a bit weepy. Now let me whisk you back to the future, or I guess the present-day England. An enormous stage was set out in a large flat field, and 300,000 people were cheering on some sort of pop-punk band. A banner above them said, Rock for Mother Earth. There were booths all around. One for solar panel earrings, another one said, Fight overpopulation, sterilize yourself. The singer of the band was about to say something pious, but something odd happened. His hair, and the hair of all the people around, stood up. There was a hum of static electricity, a flash of bright light, and Morgana and the dragon landed right on stage, crushing the lead singer and guitarist and the guy spinning the fake digital record things. Morgana stood on the dragon's lowering head, and the crowd cheered maniacally, obviously thinking it was part of the show. Well, it kind of was now, I guess. She smiled, lifted her arms, and vines and branches started to creep up from the ground. So much for Mason's theory about her not having power here. And then somewhere else in the middle of a quite busy street, there was another bright flash of light, and Merlin and our knights appeared on the sidewalk. Merlin saw the tall buildings and was taken aback. It's all right, old man. Those were here when we left, Mason said. So where is Morgana and the dragon?
The waters of time are not easy to navigate, but she is close.
Ah! A car zipped by. Merlin leapt toward the side of a building with a yelp. Watch out for those, by the way, Mason said. Look! Elvin shouted. Elvin had noticed the window of an electronics shop where a gigantic TV was tuned to a news channel. In America, it would be a car chase or school shooting, but here it was the dust-up going on in Loughton involving a large dragon and small sorceress. Elvin was reading the lower thirds. Loughton, Earth Rock Fest, marred by dragon attack. Weird, I was supposed to headline that show, but I turned it down. Look, Sid said to Mason. What? Pub, Sid said. No, Sid, we've got to get to... Sid dashed out into the street, right as a bus came barreling down, and it creamed him. Thump, 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 thud. All the knights stared, open-mouthed, as Sid, not even scratched, sat up, gave a thumbs up, and rushed to the pub, and got hit by a car coming the other way. He flipped over, hit the pavement, got up, barely breaking a stride, and entered the pub. You all saw that, right? Mason said.
Yes, no one even stopped to render assistance, Merlin said.
That's what you got out of that?
We waste time here. Morgana...
Glass shattered, and Sid was tossed out through the pub window, holding a bottle of rum in each hand. He had a jagged shard of glass jammed into his neck, but he just pulled it out and smiled his crooked Sid smile. We get it, Mason said. Sid is now somehow immortal. Someone call an Uber. And off they went to wherever. But meanwhile, or like thousands of years ago, so confusing, I know, Lillian had just said goodbye to our brave knights and gone back to her tent to have a well-deserved rest. She was about to have her first good sleep in days, but the voice of Penelope intruded.
Princess Lillian, you must come. Oh, come quickly.
Lillian ran outside and stopped next to Tristan, who was watching a fog that had begun to swirl around the distant Camelot. It was expanding and stretching outward, enveloping the land in all directions.
When did it start?
Only minutes ago, it seems, Tristan said.
This is troublesome.
Or perhaps it is good, Lillian said. Whizzing back to present-day London, there was a silence as the knights and Merlin were all crammed inhumanly into the back seat of a Mini Cooper. Mason tried to lighten the mood with some singing. Now they know how many nights it takes to fill a Mini Cooper. Yes, surprisingly few, said Reginald. Sid, that had better be Excalibur. Elvin said, What the hell are we going to do when we get there? Isn't this hag immortal?
I can't feel my legs,
Merlin moaned. Well, I'm not going to feel them for you, said Reginald. Elvin, feel Merlin's legs. He's too old for me, mate. Merlin, Mason said, you said Morgana can never return to the sea. What did you mean? What happens if she does go back to the sea?
She would most certainly die a painful and instant death.
There was a pause as the other knights, even Sid, looked at each other in dawning realization. Merlin, did you know this the whole time, or is this one of those Act 3 epiphanies before the big battle? I mean, we could... Never mind. Let's just dump her into the channel then, yeah? Easy peasy, Elvin said. You have an idea? Mason said. Oh, sorry, Mason, that was supposed to be sarcastic. Look, Merlin, can we just throw some salt water in her face? Mason asked.
She must be bodily returned to the sea.
Bugger. Driver, stop here. There was a from behind and above as they saw military helicopters approaching.
God in heaven, Merlin said, an army of dragons.
Not exactly, Mason said. Well, sort of, and they're on our side. They walked through the grassy area toward the show, and they could see Morgana and the dragon on the stage. It was like one of those concerts in the park, or like when they project a movie in the cemetery, lots of weed being smoked and picnic blankets about. And all the politicos and social justice warriors were bugging the absolute shit out of everyone. Mason guided the group behind the deserted sound mixing board for cover, as they watched a woman come right up to Morgana with a "Sterilize Now" sign on, and she shouted to Morgana, "Please, Gaia, bless me." Then the girl dropped to her knees with her arms outstretched, and suddenly bark closed around her legs, and with a flick of Morgana's wrist, the woman became a tree. So I guess she was pretty sterile after that. I found out later that the Sterilize Now people were against humans procreating because we were ruining the earth and all that. So I guess she's doing her part now as a tree at the park. Good for her. Reginald noticed Merlin staring at the choppers. Was he going to bring them down or piss himself? He could not tell. Then he said, "They're called helicopters, Merlin. They are our boys, but we're about to get an ass full of Britain's best weapons technology if we don't watch out. A plan would be nice." Merlin was watching Morgana.
She's become powerful. The dragon awaits her every command. Wait, her necklace. It's made of dragon scales. That's how she's controlling the dragon. If we could get it from her...
I thought you said she'd be weaker without the Eye of Balor.
Yes, but these people are feeding her power.
Bloody tree huggers. Can you get control of the dragon, Merlin?
I think I can.
Morgana saw the trio of army helicopters screaming in toward her. She looked at the dragon, waiting. The dragon seemed to know what she wanted, and snorted a thick wall of icicles up into the sky. In seconds, the helicopters diverged, swooped around, and scooted back. The middle one lost a rotor and spiraled down onto the ground and exploded. Luckily, the pilot got out just as the blast hit. One of the other pilots was watching from above and said, "Target is civilian rich. Do not engage. Do not engage." Morgana gloated as the helicopters pulled back. Then she saw, just sticking out of the tall grass, Sid's head, bouncing up and down, coming toward her. They locked eyes, and Sid, bless him, actually winked at her. Mason, Reg, and Elvin held him up in front of them like a shield. Sid had a look of Buddha-like sanguinity on his face as they tried to move unseen through the grass and trees, while Merlin was farther behind, out of her sight. Morgana said to her dragon, "Our friends return. Give them a proper greeting." So the dragon took to the air and unleashed a wall of dagger-sharp icicles at Sid. Some flew past. Most stuck right into him, many poking out his other side. "Ah," said the annoyed Sid. The dragon, angered by the impervious Sid, tilted its neck down, ripping Sid from our heroes, lifting Elvin 20 feet off the ground before she let go. With a flip of her jaws, the dragon sent Sid into the air, then snapped down again, jagged teeth and icy breath all aimed right at Mason. God, sounds like I'm reading a children's story. "Right off to bed you go. More tomorrow." "Just kidding, we're almost done." "Wait," Morgana ordered. The dragon, its open mouth around Mason's head, with a couple of feet to spare, stopped mid-snap. It exhaled, dusting Mason with frost. Then Morgana stepped to the edge of the stage. Yeah, remember this was all happening on stage. She said to Mason with a sinister and tranquil intensity, "I don't like you." "You don't even know me."
"Because of this fact, I think I would relish the pleasure of killing you myself."
Whatever Morgana was planning was interrupted as mobs of the half-tree women still in the crowd recognized Mason. Voices began to shout, "Oh my God! Mason Grant! That's Mason Grant! Mason!" Morgana had never seen anything like this before, and she was taken aback. She'd lost sight of Mason for a moment, and was mobbed by these fans, and suddenly he was right there next to her. He ripped the necklace from her neck and threw it to Merlin, but not before a thorn shot out of her side and into his right hip. Mason dropped to his knees.
Ow! God, that hurts!
Morgana was seething now. She spun around to face Merlin, conjuring all her powers. Electricity formed into a mass above her head, just as she sent a blast at Merlin. Merlin created a blue plasma dome around himself, which absorbed the shock. Mason, lying on his side, saw Merlin's trick.
What the We could have used that like 13 times, Merlin.
As the blue dome fizzled and popped, Merlin held the necklace in his hands. He uttered some cool-sounding Latin Gaelic kind of spell that made the dragon sit up like an obedient pup. Morgana didn't like that at all. Took a step back, almost tripping over Mason. As Merlin continued his spell, the dragon looked down at Morgana. Like really looking at her, contemplating something nasty maybe. Mason called out to the dragon,
"You know you want to, dearie. Blast her with one of those ice missiles."
The dragon's mouth clamped down around Morgana, gathering her up into its great jaws. But Morgana grabbed onto Mason just as they took to the air.
"Oh, come on! You've lost already!"
Mason cried. Mason watched as the ground became a distant memory, moving fast through wispy clouds. His left arm was locked into Morgana's supernaturally strong grip.
"Where is she taking us?"
Morgana asked.
Merlin may have told her to drop you into the sea."
Apparently that was not what Morgana wanted to hear. Her face turned almost demonic as she let out a ghastly shriek, which was heard for miles, or kilometers if you're into that sort of thing. After the scream was done, Mason said,
"I know. Puts me in a bit of a spot, too."
"You shall die with me," Morgana said.
Then Mason yelled,
"You could have stopped all this. You supervillain types are just never satisfied. You always want more. Haven't you heard that wanting what you have is better than having what you want?"
Mason couldn't get that last bit out because Morgana had spit one of those leaves out of her mouth. Damn leaf spitter. And it had stuck right onto his mouth. Mason struggled to tear it off. Then he dangled, looking at his feet. The dragon was now dipping, heading in toward the coast. The blue-black water stretched closer. Then he saw it. A Royal Navy Sea King Mk4 helicopter, sidling up next to them. Merlin and the rest of the knights had their faces pressed up against the window. Oh, I got goosebumps there, but kind of funny goosebumps, if that's a thing.
Inside the cockpit, Elvin was talking to the pilot. "Should I take it out?" the pilot asked.
"No, just don't lose them."
"Yes, sir, Sir Elvin."
They banked hard to follow as the dragon glided over the water, while Mason, now with a full tree leg and a mouth grown over with leaves, looked up one more time at Morgana, and the dragon just let them go. Not a good development, as Mason is not a strong swimmer and already had a leaf blocking his main avenue of air intake. They tumbled together for what seemed longer than that Martin Scorsese movie about the Indian reservation, and then the two of them crashed hard into the bitterly cold, shadowy water. And in a moment, the water went calm, and they were both dead. Right, you know I'm lying.
Oh my God. Mason suddenly came up for air, riding the choppy waves, struggling to breathe. Then Morgana popped up, scaring the hell out of Mason, who apparently had not seen enough movies to know that that was sure to happen.
Only she's not the slender vixen she was right before they plunged into the North Sea. She was now an ancient sea hag, white and gaunt, hundreds of years old, and partially transparent, like some human-shaped jellyfish. She screamed and flailed. Her horrified eyes stared right into Mason's, and just for a second, he felt sad for her. She reached her one hand out for him, a plea for help, and Mason actually took it, not knowing why, but her hand dissolved into goop. She slid down into the water, looking into Mason's eyes until she disappeared completely. Mason tore the now dying leaf from his lips, glad to be alive, just as a spotlight hit him from above. And fade to black, the end. Oh shit, wait, there's some more. This would be like a montage of various things getting wrapped up. Remember, this was written to be a movie.
Reginald is being interviewed by the same guy who hated Mason from earlier. And now it looks like we have to call this actor a hero, Sir Reginald Davies. I suppose before this, you'd be best known amongst the better set for your work with the RSC.
Yes, but let's not forget Woody's Got Wood with Ricky Wensleydale. Ricky was a real star, and a real hero, Reginald said.
Thank you, Reginald Davies. Oh, everyone is wondering what became of the dragon. She was slaughtered and sold to the many fine meat markets in London, like Chadwick's and Dove and Son. So if your steak tasted a little different lately... Oh, just kidding. Merlin said that he had banished her to a place she could do no one any harm. Ricky here. That was nice of Reg to say that. Love that bastard. Now let us appropriately cut away to find out what happened to the dragon. The pouting dragon sat in front of an ice cave. Blizzardy winds whipped past. A ringed planet in the sky tells us she's far, far from home. After a moment, a little furry penguin-like creature walked by her. The dragon blasted the critter with her icy breath, and the little guy rolled over on his belly, wiggling and giggling. The dragon lay down with a sigh. So there you have it. Morgana finally met her doom. The great sea dragon rendered impotent on a far-off planet, and what about that Mason chap? I wonder what happened to... Oh, here we go, whisking off to the past to catch up with lovely Princess Lillian. Most of the inhabitants of the camp were huddled around a large bonfire, which was in danger of being snuffed out by the dense mist. Lillian addressed them. You mustn't lose hope. We have enough food for many weeks. If we can get to the mountains in the north... An angry peasant guy spoke up. I can't see more than an arm's length through this fog. We'll never make it. I won't risk it. To stay here alone is suicide, Tristan said. At that moment, there was a sudden flash of light. A silhouette of a man appeared, holding a sword made of light, and the fog started to whip away, as if by a strong wind. The light died down, and Mason was there, standing right next to Sid, who held Excalibur. The gathered throng began to whoop and sing and cheer. Little Edward ran to Mason, looked up at him with awe and amazement. I knew you'd come back, the boy said. Lillian and Mason looked at each other. She walked toward him, and he took her hand. It's true. He believed you'd come back. What about you? Mason, your fame, your life, you've given up so much. You're right. I gave up everything that mattered to me. Lillian lowered her eyes, searching for words. Then Mason said, But I came to my senses. She looked up at him, and tears began to come. They kissed. It was a nice, long, leading man and woman kiss. Then she looked beyond him and saw Merlin with Elvin and Sid, revealing, in the distance, the enormous, majestic, absolutely awesome, fog-free Camelot. Mason faced them and said, Knights, to Camelot! And they marched, Mason and Lillian walking arm in arm. The last image I will leave you with is my tombstone, and my old friend Reg kneeling to place some lovely flowers on my grave. The headstone says, Sir Ricky Wensleydale, 1962 to 708. And that is now the, hold on, making sure, yes, the end. We hope you've enjoyed this adaptation of the screenplay for Hollywood Nights.